This was around 2001, maybe 2002. I was 17. My best friend Danny lived in one of those apartment complexes where half the units had broken locks on the main gate, and the other half just didn't bother using it. Not dangerous exactly, but not the kind of place you wandered around at night without paying attention. Danny lived there long enough she'd stop paying attention. She called me from the payphone downstairs. She didn't have a landline, which sounds insane now, but back then it was just Tuesday, and told me she'd seen a man outside acting strange, hiding behind things, watching her. Short guy, heavy set, head freshly shaved. Drunk enough that he was swaying, but not so drunk he'd given up on whatever he was doing. She yelled at him, told him she could see him. He stepped out, acting like he wasn't doing anything weird. Reached toward her dog Biscuit like he was trying to test whether the dog was friendly, and eventually wandered off between the buildings. Danny didn't think much of it after that. She was like that. Something could scare her, and she'd shake it off in 10 minutes and be annoyed at herself for reacting. She went back upstairs. Her front door was open. She told me about it later in pieces, the way you tell a story when you're still figuring out what it means. She said she stood there in the doorway for a second just staring at it. The door had a latch that didn't catch right. You had to hold the handle and wait a beat before letting go, or it swung back open. She always did it without thinking. It was just muscle memory at that point. Whoever had opened the door hadn't known about the latch. She went in anyway. I don't know why. I probably would have too. Biscuit didn't meet her at the door. That was the first thing that got her. Biscuit was a medium-sized mutt, brown and white, built like a loaf of bread on stilts, and was incapable of not reacting when someone came home. You could hear him skidding on the hardwood from the hallway outside, but that night he was just running around in circles. Tight, frantic circles around the living room, and then he went into the kitchen and crawled under the table and wouldn't come out. Danny left, went back downstairs, and waited for my boyfriend Marcus and me to show up. We didn't believe her. I feel bad about it now. We laughed a little. Marcus did a quick walkthrough, flipped on a few lights, checked the closets, came back out shrugging. Biscuit had calmed down a bit by then, or at least he stopped the circles. We figured she'd spooked herself. Danny had a gift for that. She could turn a creaky staircase into a whole situation. So we went to Marcus's place across the lot to hang out, and that's when we realized nobody had any rolling papers. Danny said she had some in her bathroom. She wouldn't go get them. I'm talking flat out refused. Arms crossed, jaw set, not moving. She said she didn't care. She wasn't going back in there. We teased her for another few minutes, and then I said fine, I'd go. Because I wanted the night to start, and we were wasting time. I walked across the parking lot alone. I pushed the door open and called for Biscuit out of habit. He didn't come. I looked over and he was back under the kitchen table, same position, trembling. And the thing that made my stomach shift, he was staring down the hallway. Not at me, past me, fixed on something I couldn't see from where I was standing. I left the front door open behind me. I don't know if I decided to do that or if it just happened. I turned on the lights as I went. Bathroom. Danny's sister's room. The hallway light. Normal check. Nothing felt wrong exactly. Just off. Then I got to the master bedroom. I pushed the door open and reached around for the switch. The light came on. And I saw him. He was under the bed. Just there. On his side. Face toward me. Hands folded under his cheek like he was settled in for the night. His head was shaved. Same as Danny had described. For a second, and I mean a real second, not a long one, I thought it was something else. A bag, a bundle of something. My brain tried to make it into anything other than what it was. Then his face resolved, and I understood what I was looking at. I stepped back. I didn't run. I just stepped back. One step, and pulled the door most of the way shut. Not all the way because I didn't want the click to wake him. And then I walked backward down the hallway, slow, watching the door the whole time. Every floorboard I hit sounded like a gunshot to me. I made it to the front door, stepped outside, stood there. Nothing happened. No sound, no footsteps, no door swinging open. I started thinking maybe it was laundry. Maybe I scared myself. Danny had been wound up about it all night, and I'd let it get into my head. I didn't want to go back across the lot and tell everyone there was a man under her bed, and then have Marcus go in and pull out a duffel bag. So I went back in. I picked up the kitchen knife on the way, not from planning, just from instinct. I went down the hallway again, slower this time, stopped outside the door, listened, looked at the gap underneath for shadows, for movement. Nothing. I opened it. He was still there, same position, still asleep, or unconscious, or something close to it. I cannot explain what it felt like to stand in that doorway and look at him. There was something about the stillness of it, the way he just arranged himself, like he belonged there, like he'd been there before and knew exactly where to go. I left. I ran. Marcus called the police and they got there within 10 minutes. 2 officers went in and came back out with them. The guy half conscious and grinning like it was all a misunderstanding. He tried to greet me like we knew each other, casual, unbothered. He told them he thought it was his apartment. Wrong door, wrong unit. The whole thing. Just a drunk guy who made a mistake. They took him in for the night, no charges. The door hadn't been forced and nothing had been taken. I've thought about that explanation a lot over the years, and I don't know, maybe. People do stupid things when they're drunk. I've seen it. But here's what I can't get past. If you stumbled into the wrong apartment by accident, if you were drunk and confused and just wanted to sleep, why would you go into the bedroom? Why would you get under the bed? Why not the couch? I've never come up with a good answer for that. Maybe there is one. Maybe I'm reading into it because of how frightened I was. And fear makes everything feel more deliberate than it was. But Danny would have been home alone that night. She would have gone to bed. And he would have been there, in the dark, underneath her, waiting, or sleeping, or somewhere in between. I don't know which one's worse. I don't know why I keep coming back to it. It's been almost 2 years. Louise won't talk about it. Not a word. Not even a reference. Like if she says it out loud, the whole thing becomes more real than it already is. I get that. I do. But I think about it more than I should. We were staying at my cousin's place on this small island off the coast of Scotland. It was the first time the 4 of us had been left on our own. Me, my brother Ethan, and our cousins Louise and Anne. The kind of place where nothing happens. The village went quiet before midnight. And most nights, quiet was the right word for it. Not eerie, just still. It was Louise who first said we shouldn't go out. It was also Louise who ended up coming with us. We got to the beach a little after 1. The streetlight stopped at the top of the path, which I only really noticed when we stepped off the pavement and the dark sort of wrapped around us. The tide was out. The sand stretched further than I expected. We weren't planning on staying long. It was cold, and Anne had already crossed her arms before we reached the water line, and Louise kept looking back toward the road like she was measuring the distance. We were laughing though, keeping it low because it was the middle of the night, but we were joking around. It didn't feel like the start of anything. Ethan stopped first. I didn't see why. I just noticed he'd gone still. He turned slightly, looking back out toward the water. And when Ethan does something like that, when he gets quiet fast, it pulls your attention. He told us to listen, so we did. And for a few seconds, it was just the water, the kind of rolling repetitive sound that your brain stops registering after a while. Normal. Fine. Then underneath it, something else. It wasn't words. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't a song you could name. It was more like someone half humming something they half remembered. The melody going up and then uncertain, then looping, aimless but deliberate, if that makes sense. Like the person knew what they were doing. They just weren't doing it for anyone. Louise whispered that it was probably a siren. Anne told her to stop. I laughed a little. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative, taking it seriously, didn't feel like an option yet. I could see the figure now, far out, close to where the water would be at high tide, moving slowly back and forth. I thought maybe they had a dog. That's what I told myself. Late night walk, dog running ahead, person doing what people do when they're waiting, humming, moving, lost in their own head. We've all done it. We started walking back. I noticed the humming getting louder before I said anything. I thought I was imagining it, that the wind had shifted, or that my ears adjusted, and I was just hearing it better now. I didn't say it out loud. Anne said to keep moving. Ethan started recording on his phone, and I did the same. I don't really know why. Maybe because recording feels like doing something. The camera autofocused as we walked, and I tilted the screen to catch the beach behind us. She was closer. Not a little closer. A lot closer. I'd been watching her from the corner of my eye for the last few minutes, and I told myself she was still far away, but the phone didn't lie about it. The distance was wrong. The distance had been wrong for longer than I'd registered. I turned around properly then. I needed to actually look, not just glance. And that's when I noticed the figure was no longer walking. She was full-on sprinting. Not jogging, not fast walking, running in a straight line directly towards us. And she was still humming. That was the part I couldn't make sense of. The sound hadn't changed. The same wandering melody, no urgency in it, while her body was doing something completely different. There wasn't a decision to run, we just ran. Louise was already moving, and that's the thing about panic. It's contagious before you even fully processed why. We turned and ran for the exit, up the path toward the road, and the sound of the humming was still behind us, and I couldn't tell if it was getting louder because she was faster, or because sound carries differently when you're scared. The house was close. I kept thinking, the house is close. The streetlights are right there. Just get to the street. We turned the corner and I looked back once, which I probably shouldn't have done. The beach exit was maybe 15 meters behind us. I couldn't see her, but I could hear her, that melody, still moving, still in the same pattern. And it wasn't coming from the beach anymore. It was closer, somewhere off to the left, still moving. We got inside. Ethan locked the door. Anne hit the light switch and the living room went dark. We crouched by the window. Me, Ethan, Anne, and Louise sat further back. She had her knees pulled up and she wasn't saying anything, just breathing. We watched the street. A minute passed, maybe two, and then she walked into the light. She came from the left, from wherever she'd cut through, moving at a normal pace now like nothing had happened. She stepped under the lamppost and stopped, and then she started dancing. That's the only word for it. Not convulsing, not stumbling, dancing in slow, wide circles, her arms out at her sides, axe in hand, her head tilted back. The humming had started again, the same wandering melody, and her feet moved with it in a way that almost looked rehearsed, like she'd done this before, like she did this often. None of us said anything. I don't think any of us breathed. She raised the axe above her head mid-dance and brought it down hard into the tarmac. The sound reached us half a second later. A crack, sharp and long. She pulled it free and did it again and again, still humming. The melody didn't change. There was no break in it, no grunt of effort, just that same aimless tune over and over, while she swung the axe into the road, like she was furious at the ground itself, like she was punishing the street for something it had done. Anne's hand found my arm. I didn't look at her. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. Then she stopped. She stood there for a moment with the axe hanging at her side, her head still tilted back, looking up at something none of us could see. Then she lowered her chin, rolled her shoulders, and walked away down the road, unhurried, casual. The humming faded as she went. The lamppost lit an empty street. Anne still hadn't let go of my arm. Louise behind us didn't ask what we'd seen. I think she already knew she didn't want to. I've thought about this more than I should. I've tried to explain it. A local maybe. Someone who wasn't well. Someone who had a bad night that went somewhere none of us could follow. I don't know where she went after she rounded that corner. I don't know what she was angry at. Maybe she was angry we got away. I don't know. But I know what I saw. And I know the next morning, there were 3 fresh gouges in the road outside the house that hadn't been there the night before. And none of us mentioned them to my cousin's parents. And they flew home 2 days later. And I haven't been back since. I was 15, living in a quiet part of Houston where the neighbors knew your name and the streets were wide and well lit. The kind of neighborhood where people left their garage doors open by accident and nothing ever happened. My parents believed in safety the way people believe in something they've never had to test. I believed it too back then. Most nights when sleep wouldn't come, I'd slip out the back door around midnight and walk to Westbrook Park. 5 minutes there, 5 minutes back. I never told anyone. There was nothing to tell. It was just me, the crickets, and the orange glow of the streetlights on the pavement. It felt like the neighborhood was mine during those hours, and I liked that feeling. I should have paid more attention to why it felt that way. The night it happened started the same as every other. I couldn't sleep. The house felt too still, too warm. I pulled on my shoes, checked that my parents' door was still closed, and slipped outside. The air was thick and humid the way Houston summers always are. Even past midnight, I remember the sound of my footsteps on the sidewalk. I remember thinking about nothing in particular. Then I saw the figure. It was standing maybe 200 feet behind me, just at the edge of where the streetlight reached. Tall, very thin, long dark hair hanging down past his shoulders. I stopped for a second and looked, and it stopped too. Or maybe it had already been standing still. I couldn't tell. My brain immediately tried to explain it away. Someone else who couldn't sleep. A neighbor out for a late walk. I turned back around and kept moving, but something had shifted in me. Something small and quiet, like a light turning on in a room you didn't know was dark. I didn't look back again for a while. I focused on walking normally, keeping my pace steady. The park was close. I could see the tree line ahead. In between me and the park entrance, there was the mirror, a large traffic safety mirror bolted onto a wooden post at the curve in the path, the kind put there so you could see around corners. The neighborhood association had installed it years ago after some kids on bikes had collisions. I walked past it 100 times without thinking twice. That night it saved my life. I reached the curve and glanced into the mirror the way you'd glance at anything. Casual, barely even a thought. And then I saw him. He was closer than he should have been. Much closer. He had closed the distance while I was looking forward. And he was moving with that quiet, deliberate pace that made the hairs on my arms stand up all at once. He wasn't running. He wasn't hurrying. He was just walking, like a man who already knew where this was going. And he was holding an axe. Not a small hatchet, a full axe, hanging down at his side. The kind you split wood with. He held it loosely, almost casually, the blade catching a thin sliver of light. I ran. I don't remember making the decision. My body just went. I heard my shoes slapping on the pavement, and then I heard something else behind me. Heavier footsteps, faster than I expected, and I knew he was running too. I didn't scream. I don't know why. Maybe because screaming felt like it would use up air I needed. Or maybe because part of me already understood that no one was awake to hear it. I turned off the path without thinking. There was a section of the park's edge where the 2 rows of bushes grew together, thick and knotted, full of prickle branches that caught your skin like fish hooks. I'd avoided them my whole childhood. That night I ran straight through them. It was like running through barbed wire. The branches tore across my arms and my cheeks and my shins, and I kept going, ducking and pushing until I broke through to the other side into the neighboring street. I was bleeding in a dozen small places, breathing so hard I could hear it in my own ears. I looked back through the gap in the bushes. He was standing at the other side, still, not trying to come through, just standing there in the dark, with the axe at his side, and his face was hidden in the shadow of his hair. And he didn't move. He didn't call out. He didn't do anything at all. He just watched me. I don't know how long I stood there staring back at him. It felt long. Long enough that my breathing slowed down and the cuts on my arms started to burn. Then I ran again, this time all the way home, every light on every house looking like salvation. I locked every door, every window. I sat on my bedroom floor with my back against the bed and my little brother's baseball bat across my knees, and I waited for sounds. A door handle turning, glass breaking, footsteps in the hall. Nothing came. When morning arrived, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. My arms had thin red lines across them, some scabbed over already. I told my mom I'd fallen asleep in the bushes near the park. She believed me. It wasn't really a lie. I never went back, not at night, not alone. I never told my parents what actually happened, and for a long time I told myself it was because I didn't want them to worry. But the real reason was simpler than that. If I said it out loud, I'd have to figure out what it meant, and I didn't want to know what it meant. What I kept coming back to, even now, is the stillness of him at the end. He had chased me, and then he stopped, and he didn't push through the bushes. He didn't try to go around. He just stood there and watched me go. I don't know if that means I got away, or if he just decided, for reasons I'll never understand, that he was finished. My husband travels for work about twice a month, sometimes more. We've been in the house for 3 years by that point, long enough that I'd stopped triple checking the locks before bed. You get comfortable. That's the thing nobody warns you about. Comfort is just fear that's forgotten itself. It was a Wednesday night in February, which matters because February in our part of Ohio is dead. Not poetic dead, literally dead. The neighbors don't walk their dogs. The kids aren't outside. Everyone retreats behind doors somewhere around Thanksgiving and doesn't really come back until April. Our street, Caldwell Court, is a short cul-de-sac tucked behind a Lutheran church, 8 houses total, and in February could pass for a movie set that hadn't been used in years. Joel had flown to Atlanta for a conference. He'd be back Friday. I had 2 days. I want to stress how normal Wednesday was. I heated up leftover soup. I graded papers. I teach 7th grade English, while a true crime podcast played in the background. I showered, put on socks, and was in bed by 10:15. I was asleep before I even finished the chapter I'd opened. The phone woke me at 12:48 a.m. Unknown number. Ohio area code. Different city. I let it ring. Telemarketers auto-dial at all hours now. I read that somewhere. I set my phone face down and closed my eyes. It called back at 12:51. Same number. I declined it, turned the ringer off, and that was that. I fell back asleep annoyed but not frightened. There was nothing frightening about it yet. I didn't think about the calls Thursday morning. I made coffee, drove to school, argued with the parent over email about their son's essay grade, ate a granola bar for lunch, and drove home. Ordinary. I noticed the smell when I walked inside. Nothing strong. The ghost of something. Cigarette smoke maybe. Or something chemical. Like a cleaning product I didn't own. I stood in the kitchen doorway and sniffed in the air like a dog. After a moment I convinced myself it was the neighbors. Old houses share air through walls and vents in strange ways. I cracked a window above the sink and moved on. That night I was on the couch watching television when I heard footsteps on the porch. Our porch is wood, and it pops and settles in the cold constantly. But these were even and deliberate, one after another, moving from the right side of the porch to the left, toward the large front window. I muted the TV. The footsteps stopped. I sat completely still in the blue television light, watching the window, waiting to see a silhouette. Nothing. After 2 full minutes, I breathed again. A raccoon, maybe. The cold making the wood shift. I turned the volume back up. I went to bed with the hall light on for the first time since we moved in, and I told myself it didn't mean anything. I woke up at 3:14 a.m. to the sound of knocking. Not at the front door. At the window beside my bed. 2 knocks. Deliberate. With the real weight behind them. The way a person knocks on a door when they want to be heard. Not aggressive, almost polite. That's what made it so much worse. Something about the patience of it. I did not move. I understood, in some animal lair beneath thought, that moving would be a mistake. I lay on my side with my eyes open, staring at the far wall, and became aware that I could hear breathing just outside the glass. Or I thought I could, over the sound of my own heartbeat loud in my ears. Then a voice, quiet, conversational, mouth close to the window. I just need a minute of your time. I bit down on the inside of my cheek to keep me from making a sound. My phone was on the nightstand, 18 inches from my hand. I moved for it slowly, the way you move when you know you're being watched, and I called 911 in the dark, with my phone against my stomach, speaking barely above breath when the dispatcher answered. She had asked me twice to speak up. Each time she asked, I was certain the voice outside the window would respond instead. The police arrived in 11 minutes. A lot can happen in 11 minutes. What actually happened was nothing, which should have made me feel better, but didn't. They walked the perimeter. They found nothing. No footprints. The ground was frozen solid. No signs of tampering at the window. One officer asked if I had any, quote, difficult people in my life. A former student's family, maybe. A neighbor dispute. The way he asked it suggested he already drafted his own explanation and just needed me to confirm it. They left at 4:30. I did not sleep. Joel came home Friday afternoon and I told him everything. He listened seriously, which I appreciated. He checked the window locks himself, drove the perimeter of the block, spoke with the neighbor directly to our left. Nobody had seen anything. That evening he said carefully, I wonder if the stress of the semester is building up. He wasn't dismissive. He was worried about me in the wrong direction. I dropped it. I almost believed him. Saturday I was home alone while Joel ran errands. I was at the kitchen table working when my cell phone lit up. Unknown number. Ohio area code. The same one. I answered. There was a pause, and then a man's voice said, I left something for you. Check your mailbox. The line went dead. I want to be precise here because I've replayed this moment thousands of times. I did not go to the mailbox right away. I stood in the kitchen for 4 minutes doing nothing. Then I got my coat, went to the front door, and looked through the peephole first. The street was empty. I walked to the mailbox. Inside was a single photograph. It was printed on regular printer paper, slightly grainy, the way phone photos look when you blow them up. It was taken from outside, through a window. It was my bedroom, clearly unmistakably. The quilt, the lamp, the stack of books on my nightstand, and I was in it, asleep. I cannot tell you the exact moment in the timeline this was taken, but the hall light was off in the photo, which means it was before Thursday night, which means this started before I knew it had started. We moved out of that house within the month. We still don't know who it was. The police opened a file, collected the photograph, made a report. The unknown number traced to a prepaid phone purchased with cash at a gas station 40 minutes south of us. There was no arrest. Sometimes I think about what he said at the window, the patience of it. I just need a minute of your time. Like it was a courtesy call, like he was doing me a favor by knocking. I think about the fact that he had a photo of me sleeping, which means at some point, before any of this, before the calls and the footsteps and the knocking, he stood outside my bedroom window in the dark and watched me long enough to decide I was worth coming back to. And I never knew. I was asleep. I was comfortable. That's the thing nobody warns you about. I've worked the overnight shift at a hotel for going on 3 years now. It's not glamorous. You're mostly alone. You check in the occasional late arrival. You run the audit reports at 3 a.m. and you watch the clock until the morning crew relieves you at 7. I'm 24. I took the job because the differential pay was decent, and I've always been a night person. Or at least, I used to think I was. This happened about 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't entirely decided what I believe about it. The hotel is a mid-sized property, 112 rooms, 6 floors, attached to a conference center that sits empty most weeknights. It's the kind of place that hosts wedding blocks on weekends and corporate retreats Monday through Wednesday, and then goes almost completely quiet by Thursday. The building itself is older, renovated in the mid-2000s, so it has that particular smell, carpet cleaner and recycled air, and long corridors that absorb sound in a way that makes the whole place feel underwater after midnight. I had been awake for a long time that night, not as long as some people go, but long enough. My daughter had an ear infection and had been crying the night before, which meant my wife and I were both up, and neither of us had gotten more than maybe 90 minutes of broken sleep before I had to drive in for my shift. I'm not complaining, that's just the setup, because it matters. The hotel was at 40% occupancy, conference center was dark, parking lot had maybe 20 cars. My coworker, a guy named Darren who does the overnight security walk, had already done his 11 p.m. round and come back to tell me it was quiet before settling into the back office to watch something on his phone. By 1 in the morning, I was alone at the front desk, running on stale coffee and that particular kind of tired that sits behind your eyes like pressure. Around 1:15, the elevator at the end of the lobby dinged. That happens sometimes. Guests come down for ice, for vending, for no reason at all because they can't sleep. I looked up from the desk, ready to give whoever it was a polite nod. The elevator door opened. The lobby was dim, the way it always is overnight, with the ambient light from the front entrance and the soft glow from behind the desk. I could see clearly enough. No one came out. I waited a few seconds, assuming maybe someone had hit the button from upstairs, and then decided not to come down. The doors closed. I went back to my monitor. At 1:40, I did my own walk. Darren's supposed to do a second round at 2, but I usually do a quick lap through the conference center side just to feel like I've moved my legs. The conference center connects to the hotel on the second floor via an enclosed walkway. I hate that walkway at night. It's mostly glass, so in the winter you can feel the cold radiating through it, and because of the angle, the lighting through the parking lot hits in a way that makes your reflection appear and disappear depending on where you're standing. It's the kind of place your brain invents movement in your peripheral vision without any help. I was almost back to the door when I saw a woman sitting in one of the chairs in the far end of the conference foyer. Just sitting there in the dark, posture rigid, hands folded in her lap, facing toward the window that looks out to the side parking lot. I stopped. My first thought was that the guest had wandered over and maybe fallen asleep sitting up, which sounds impossible, but genuinely happens. My second thought, almost simultaneously, was that every door between the hotel and the conference center requires a key after 10 p.m., and I hadn't badged through any door that was already open. I had used my card each time. I took a step toward her. She was older, white hair, dressed in something dark, a cardigan maybe. The kind of thing that looks like it belongs from a different decade. She was very still. I called out, "Ma'am, are you a guest with us?" She didn't move. Not a flinch, not a turn of the head. I took 2 more steps and the lights in the conference foyer, which are motion sensors, clicked on automatically, and the whole space flooded with that flat fluorescent light. The chair was empty, clean, pushed neatly up on the edge of the round table like no one had touched it all day. I stood there for what felt like a long time. There was nowhere she could have gone. The exit doors are alarmed. The door back to the hotel walkway was 10 feet behind me and hadn't opened. She was there, and then she wasn't. I stood in that bright, empty room and felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I went back to the desk and I didn't tell Darren, partly because I didn't know how to say it, and partly because I'd already started doing the math in my head. 31 hours without real sleep, close enough to the threshold where your brain starts generating things and presenting them to you as fact. I convinced myself. I almost had myself fully convinced. At 3 a.m., I was running the night audit, which requires me to essentially lock the system for about 20 minutes while the reports generate. During that window, I can't check anyone in, can't pull up reservations, can't do much of anything, so I usually just sit and wait. The lobby was completely silent. Darren had gone back to the office. The parking lot outside the front windows was still. Then the phone at the desk rang. It was our internal line, the 4-digit extension that guests use to call the front desk from their rooms. The display showed the room number 614. We have 6 floors. We have 112 rooms. The 6th floor only goes up to room 608. I stared at the display. It rang 4 times. I picked it up and said the standard greeting, our hotel name. How can I help you? There was sound on the other end. Not static, not silence. Breathing. Low and slow, and deeply unhurried. The way someone breathes when they're not aware they're being heard. Then a voice, a woman's voice, old and soft, said something I've been trying to unhear ever since. She said, "The ice machine on my floor is broken." And then the line went dead. I stood up so fast my chair rolled back and hit the wall. I pulled the room list. I pulled it up twice. There is no 614. There has never been a 614. Our 6th floor rooms run from 601 to 608. I went into the call log to see if I could find the internal extension record. There was no log of an incoming call at 3:04 a.m. No record. Nothing. Darren came out around 3:30, and I had him do an early walk on the 6th floor. He came back and told me it was empty. All 8 rooms. Dark. Quiet. Undisturbed. He didn't find an old woman. He didn't find anything. I've looked into sleep deprivation hallucinations since then. I know what the literature says. I know the brain can generate voices, images, entire sensory experiences when it's been pushed far enough. I know this, but I also didn't imagine the call log disappearing. I know I didn't imagine seeing those 4 digits on the display. I've put a request to transfer to day shift. I'm still waiting to hear back. I was 19 the first time I ever felt like something was genuinely haunting me. Not a person, not an animal. Something that seemed to understand that I knew it was there. I'm 24 now, and I still can't explain what happened. I've told the story maybe 3 times total, and only to people I trust. My buddy Marcus was there for the whole thing. Without him, I'd probably convinced myself I'd imagined it. This was in rural Kentucky, maybe 40 minutes outside of Lexington. Marcus and I were heavy into exploring at the time. Abandoned farmhouses, old rail tunnels, condemned properties. We had a blog that maybe 12 people read. We drove out one Friday night in early November because someone on an Urbex forum had posted coordinates to an abandoned textile mill that had been sitting empty since the 80s. Supposedly the whole complex was intact, and supposedly nobody ever went out there because the surrounding property was a maze of drainage ditches and overgrown access roads. The kind of place that discourages people naturally, without needing a fence. We got there around 11 at night. My truck sat alone on a gravel turnout off a 2-lane road with no name on the sign, just a county number. The mill was maybe a quarter mile through a field and into a thin tree line. We had done this 100 times. We knew the protocol. Stay calm, stay quiet. Don't use the flashlights unless you absolutely have to. The mill itself was everything the forum post promised. 3 stories of old brick, most of the windows blown out, ceiling collapsed in sections. We moved through the ground floor for maybe 20 minutes, photographing machinery that turned to abstract sculpture under decades of rust and vine. It was a good night. Quiet. Cold. No wind. That's when Marcus grabbed my arm. He didn't say anything. He just held my arm and tilted his head toward the far end of the mill floor, where a long row of broken looms disappeared into the dark. I listened. Someone was playing a pipe. Not a flute exactly. Lower, earthier, like a tin whistle, but wrong somehow, like whoever was playing it had learned from a recording and never from another person. The melody was there, a real melody, structured, repeating, but underneath the structure something was slightly off in a way I couldn't name. A note held half a second too long, a phrase that resolved in a direction you weren't expecting. It was coming from deeper inside the building. My first instinct, I'll be honest, was that it was interesting. Some homeless guy who plays music. Weird, but not dangerous. Marcus looked at me and mouthed, "Let's go," and I agreed. We moved quietly back toward the entrance we used, a ground floor window frame we'd stepped through off a loading dock. We were 15 feet from the window when the music stopped. Not faded, not wound down. Stopped like someone had pressed a button. The silence was immediate and heavy, and both of us froze in it without talking about it. That particular kind of silence is hard to describe unless you've experienced it. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of held breath. The whole building felt like it was listening back at us. We made it out. I remember exhaling when my boots hit the loading dock. Marcus hopped down ahead of me, and we moved fast across the field, back toward the tree line. I kept glancing over my shoulder at the mill's dark windows. Nothing. We were halfway through the trees when we heard it again. It was outside. That stopped me completely, because we had been moving for 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, through a field and into woods. And the music, that same melody, that same wrong resolution at the end of the phrase, was drifting through the trees from somewhere ahead of us and to the left. Marcus said quietly, "That's not possible." He was right. There was no way someone had gotten out of that building, around us, and ahead of us in time that we'd been walking, not without us seeing them cross the open field. The tree line was thin but not instant cover. We would have seen movement. We stood there in the dark and just listened to it play. The thing that cored me out wasn't that it was loud or close. It was the opposite. It was calm, patient. The tempo never changed. Whoever or whatever was playing the pipe wasn't running, wasn't rushing, wasn't reacting to us at all. It sounded like someone playing in their living room. Marcus started moving toward the truck, and I followed without debate. Here's the part that still bothers me the most. The music didn't get quieter as we walked away from it. For maybe 4 or 5 minutes as we pushed through the brush and back toward the gravel road, the volume stayed exactly the same. Not louder, not softer, the same. Like it was maintaining a constant distance. We broke out of the tree line and hit the gravel, and the music stopped again. My truck was sitting exactly where I'd left it. No other vehicles, no signs of anyone. The field and the road behind us were empty in both directions under a half moon, and I stood there scanning for a full minute because I needed to see nothing, and I needed to confirm something for me. I don't know what. I didn't find anyone. There was no one. Marcus got in the truck without a word, and I drove us back to the highway. We talked about everything other than what happened for about 10 minutes. The way you do when something shakes you, but you're not ready to name it yet. Then Marcus said, "It knew where we were going." I didn't answer him, but I've been thinking the same thing since we pulled off that road, because our truck was the only vehicle out there. No houses nearby. No reason for anyone to be in that field at 11 on a Friday night. Whatever was in those woods didn't wander in after us. It was already there when we arrived. It heard our doors closed. It watched us cross that field, and it waited, patient, unhurried, until we were deep enough inside before it let us hear it. That's the part I can't shake. Not what it was, but how long it already been watching before we ever knew to be scared. I went back to that forum post the next day to message the guy who shared the coordinates. His account had been deleted. I searched for any other post about the mill. There was nothing. Marcus and I still explore, but we have one rule we never discuss or negotiate. We're in the car before midnight. We've never talked about why. We don't need to.
So my friends always say that if something unlucky is going to happen, then it will most likely happen to me. They always say that if there is a creeper around, then I will end up being the one creeped on. Both of these statements seem to be true. I've been stalked multiple times, some ending pretty badly, and I have the worst luck imaginable. This story happened 3 years ago, and I still have nightmares about it. My mother came to stay with me for a week, which I knew would be a nightmare. We can hardly stand to be in the same room as one another, so fighting is inevitable. On her 5th night here, we got into a heated debate about religion and somehow turned into a full-out screaming match. About an hour into the screaming, my apartment manager knocked on the door. Before I could even apologize, my mother jumps in and says that I had been threatening her. I was so shocked and appalled that it threw me into a mini panic attack. I grabbed my keys from the key rack by the door and took off. It wasn't the wisest thing to do, but I was so frazzled that I didn't know what else to do. I ended up sobbing my eyes out and just driving. This went on and off for about an hour and 70 miles. Driving has always calmed me down, so even after the tears subsided, I kept going. About another hour later, I saw an exit for a dam, which surprised me. I lived here for 2 years, and I had no idea there was a dam anywhere close by. I decided to go take a look, even though it was 3 a.m. and pitch black. I still wasn't ready to head back, and this seemed like a good distraction. It was another 30 miles on a desolate road before I finally reached the dam. It was hard to miss because it was the only light I had seen for those 30 miles. I crossed the dam and saw that there were a couple of turns leading to campsites. At this point, I also realized that there was a legit lake. Yeah, I know, dam equals lake, but I didn't really put the two together. I decided to flip around and go back to a little parking area I had seen near the dam. Once there, I parked and my night took a turn for the terrifying. I parked and proceeded to make one idiotic move after another. I rolled down one of my windows and could hear the sound of water hitting ashore, but in the light of my headlights, I couldn't see where it was coming from. The mosquitoes were pretty bad, so I rolled my window back up and started fishing around in my back seat for a flashlight that I knew I had somewhere in the car. Then I remembered that I had it in my trunk. Now, for what happens next, please feel free to label me as an idiot, because I surely am. I popped the trunk, turned off my car, opened the door, stepped out, closed the door, got the flashlight, closed the trunk, went back to the door, and it was locked. My doors unlock when you open them, so I have no idea how the door became locked again, but it was, and like the moron that I am, I still had the key in the ignition. I knew the door should have remained unlocked, so I hadn't really thought about taking the key. Instantly, tears started to well up because I knew I hadn't even bothered taking my phone with me. I panicked for a little while, but then I remembered the campsites I had seen, and I hoped that maybe someone would be in one and that they would have a phone I could borrow. I started walking and fretting about waking up some poor stranger in the middle of the night, but I didn't see any other options. Each campsite I came to was completely empty. I think I checked like 15 or so before I started to get really nervous about how far I was wandering from my car. I think I had to have walked about a mile or so, and on the walk back, my battery started to fade on the flashlight. I was only about halfway back, I'd say, and my panic reached a whole new level. For whatever reason, the parking area in my car seemed like a safe haven, and I started sprinting. Remember what I said about being a moron with bad luck? Yeah. In my panic and in the darkness, I got switched around somewhere and ended up in a dead-end campsite, even though I would have sworn that I was still on the main road. This is when the major tears started. I panicked even more and ended up yet in another campsite. It felt like I was just getting more and more lost, and I couldn't hear the water anymore, so I calmed myself and decided to stay put till morning, which I knew wasn't too far away. I sat down, wrapped my arms around my legs, and proceeded to try rocking myself into calmness. It worked pretty well until I saw him. I had my eyes closed as I rocked, but then I heard a dull footstep. I looked up, obviously startled, and saw him standing only a few feet away. He was massive to me, and had a large but not fat build, like a football player. In hindsight, it's amazing that I hadn't heard him approaching sooner. For a second, all I could do was stare in the horror I was feeling and gasp out incomprehensible words. Then I literally screamed. It only took him a second to cross the distance between us, but I didn't even have the time to properly get up before he had his hand around my throat, choking me. For reference, I'm 5'3" and 132 pounds. Not skinny, but not fat. To him, I was nothing more than a rag doll. I wasn't even sure what was happening, but I was being jerked around by the neck and arm. His hands were huge, and every place he grasped and pulled felt like he would snap something. When the movement stopped, I was in his lap with my head pressed against his chest, and one of his legs partially crossed over me. He was half cradling me, half grappling me. I was too dazed to make a sound, but when I tried, his hand would tighten over my throat again. I went still for a few moments, but then I felt his tongue against my throat. He smelled like rancid beer and something decomposing. I struggled to get free again, but this time he pinched my esophagus between his thumb and forefinger. It was light at first, but then he started increasing the pressure. By the time he was done, I felt like I was going to pass out. I don't want to go into too much detail because the memory is still hard to revisit, but he went back to licking, groping, and kissing. It was traumatizing, but he never went for anything too intimate. I gave up on trying to scream or get away, but he would still occasionally choke me. I sat there and simply sobbed. Then, possibly even more disturbing, he started to hum and rock me. I'm not sure why this part bothered me so much, but it did. His voice seemed higher than it should be, and his hum was rather nasal. I don't know how to describe that. Then, just as his humming was becoming almost frantic sounding, I saw headlights and he stopped, Somewhere in the distance, it looked as if a car was heading our way. He also saw it, and I felt panic well up inside me, worried that he would drag me off somewhere, but he didn't. He simply let me go, stood up, and walked the opposite way into the trees. Without him supporting me, I fell back slightly and watched him walk off. The sun wasn't fully up yet, but there was enough light to make out more of him than I had been able to before. He looked as bad as he smelled. Dirty, saggy jeans, a white hoodie that was so stained that it looked brownish gray, and medium-length brown matted hair. I didn't see his face at all because I kept my eyes shut for the entire time that he had me. I could hear the car getting closer, and I stood up. About 30 feet away was my flashlight and where I had been sitting, and I realized how far he had taken me while he pulled me around like a doll. I could see the car lights through the trees, but then they suddenly took a left and panic set in again. I worried that he would come back if he saw that the car wasn't coming to this campsite. I started to run. I didn't even care about staying on a path or road, just as long as I could still see the car. I caught myself on a few bushes and scraped myself, falling a few times, but the pain didn't even register. I was too desperate to care. It felt like forever, and I don't know how long I actually ran, but I eventually ended up being close enough to the car that the couple inside noticed me. They stopped and the guy got out. I remember not even being able to talk. For a long while, I was just shrieking at the poor guy. Even before I could tell him what happened, his girlfriend had called the police. Everything after that seems like a blur now. The couple drove me to the parking area as told to do so by the cops, just in case the man was still around. The sheriff's department showed up, took my statement, took me to the nearest station, asked for another statement, checked me for evidence, called my mother, and contacted the fire department to break into my car for me. Just as my mom and friend arrived at the station, a sheriff's car pulled up, and in the back seat was the man. I was promptly pulled back inside and asked to make a positive identification. Wasn't like in the movies though. They literally just brought him up to me and asked, "This him?" Now this part still leaves me extremely emotionally confused, but it is what it is. As I looked up at him, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked ashamed, confused, and oddly vulnerable. And then his eyes started to tear up. I knew that something had to be wrong with him mentally, and in a weird way I actually felt some sympathy for him. I did confirm that it was him, but afterwards, I actually worried enough about him that I asked what would happen to him. This is where sympathy flew out the window. He was indeed mentally unstable, as I found out, but he was also a convicted sex offender already. Yeah, I actually lucked out with what little had happened to me. Looking back, it seems more like a dream, or nightmare. My mother and friend took me back to my car, and rather than being stuck in a car with my mom, I opted to let her drive my car back and I rode with my friend. The entire drive back, she kept drilling me for more information, but I couldn't bring myself to even talk about it. I still don't like talking about it, and I refuse to ever go camping again. I'm also extremely paranoid about always having my key on me when I step out of my car. Not a funny haha kind of paranoid, but literally is now a compulsion to check to make sure I have my key with me. I usually have to check like 3 times to satisfy myself. And oh yeah, as far as the guy goes, he was admitted to a psych hospital, and I really hope he remains there. I want to start by saying I'm not someone who writes things like this on the internet. I'm in my late 40s and I barely use social media, and the only reason I'm posting this at all is because my daughter found a thread similar to this one and sent it to me and said, "Mom, you need to put your story here because people need to hear it." So here I am. Bear with me because I'm going to tell this the way I remember it, which is every single detail, because this is the kind of night that burns itself into you permanently. This was 2003. My kids were young. My son Marcus was 7 and my daughter Reese was 5. My husband Dale was still with us then. We were a young family and it was a Saturday afternoon in August in Central Florida, where we lived at the time. It was brutally hot the way Florida in August always is, and the kids had been cooped up inside all day and were climbing the walls. Dale suggested that we take them to Chuck E. Cheese for dinner as a treat. The kids lost their minds with excitement, so we loaded up the minivan and drove about 20 minutes to the nearest location and got there around 5 in the evening. If you've ever been to a Chuck E. Cheese in the early 2000s, you know exactly what it's like. Loud beyond all reason, flashing lights everywhere, sticky floors, and the smell of cheap pizza and that specific brand of chaos that only exists when you put 50 children in a room full of arcade games and tokens. We got our tokens, got a table, ordered pizza, and let the kids run loose the way you do. Dale and I sat at the table drinking sodas and taking turns walking around keeping an eye on Marcus and Reese. The man was already there when we arrived. I noticed him within the first 15 minutes, but didn't really think much of it initially. He was sitting alone at a table near the back. No food in front of him. No kids anywhere near him. Probably mid-40s. Thin and wearing a button-up shirt that seemed too formal for the setting. Just sitting there watching the room. I registered him the way you register something slightly out of place and then moved on. About 45 minutes in or so, Marcus came running up to our table and asked for more tokens. Gave him a handful and he ran back toward the games. I watched him go and noticed the man had moved. He was now standing near the ticket redemption counter, closer to where the kids were playing. Still alone, just watching. I mentioned it to Dale quietly. He looked over and shrugged and said the guy was probably waiting for someone. I nodded and told myself the same thing. Then the man walked over to our table. He stood at the edge of it and looked at me and then at Dale and smiled in this way that felt weird. And said something like, "Great kids you've got." I said thank you in that clipped way you do when you want someone to know the conversation is over. Dale nodded at him. The man didn't move for a moment. Just stood there at the end of our table laughing and then said he'd seen us come in and thought we looked like a really nice family. That he'd been watching us since we got there. I didn't say anything. Dale said, "Thanks, man," in a tone that meant please leave now. The man held that smile for another second and then walked way back toward his table. Dale and I looked at each other pretty creeped out. I said I wanted to leave. Dale said let's just finish the pizza and keep an eye on him. I agreed because the kids were happy and the pizza had just arrived and I told myself I was overreacting. But the man kept moving. Every time I looked up, he was somewhere different and always closer to wherever Marcus and Reese were. At one point, I got up to take Reese to the bathroom and when we came out, he was standing in the hallway near the bathroom entrance. He looked at Reese and said she was a pretty little girl. I put my hand on Reese's shoulder and walked past him without responding, and went straight back to Dale and told him we were leaving right now. Dale went and got Marcus while I started gathering our things. I looked over and the man was back at his table watching us pack up. When we were ready to go and started heading toward the exit, he stood up. I watched him over my shoulder as we walked out. He followed us to the entrance area, not rushing, just walking steadily behind us, and then stopped at the door and watched us through the glass as we crossed the parking lot. I told Dale he followed us to the door. Dale looked back and saw him standing there watching us through the glass, and his jaw tightened, and he told me to get the kids to the car while he went back in to speak to a manager. I said, "Please just come to the car and we'll call someone from there." He listened and we all walked to the minivan together. It was parked toward the back of the lot, not far, maybe 60 feet or so from the entrance. I had the keys and I clicked the unlock button when we were about 20 feet away, and the lights flashed. Marcus ran ahead the way kids do and grabbed the handle of the sliding door and yanked it open and climbed in. What happened next took about 3 seconds and I have replayed it thousands of times. Marcus screamed. Not the way a kid screams when they're startled or playing, the way a child screams when something is truly wrong. Dale was at the side door in an instant and I grabbed Reese and pulled her back away from the car. The man from inside was in the back row of our minivan. I do not know how long he had been in there, and I do not know how he got in there because I am certain I locked that car when we arrived. He was crouched in the back seat and he had a machete across his lap. What happened next? I'm not going to describe in full detail because I have children who may one day read this and because some of it I still can't fully put into words. Dale grabbed Marcus out of the car and pushed him toward me and I ran with both kids to the entrance of the Chuck E. Cheese, screaming for someone to call 911. A staff member got us inside and locked the door and someone called the police. Dale did not come with us. He spent 4 days in the hospital, 2 surgeries. He has a scar that runs from his left shoulder down across his back that he will have for the rest of his life. He does not talk about those few minutes in the parking lot and I have never pushed him to. What I know is that when the police arrived, they found the man on the ground next to the minivan, and Dale was the one who had put him there. The machete was on the asphalt. The man was arrested that night. It came out during the process that followed that he had a history of incidents like this, that he had been known to police in 2 other counties, and that he had targeted families before. A family, in a public place full of children on a Saturday night. I have never fully understood what his intentions were, and I'm not sure I really want to. My kids are now young adults. Neither of them has been inside a Chuck E. Cheese since that night, and neither has Dale, and neither have I. Marcus told me a few years ago that he still has a hard time in loud, crowded places. Something about the noise and the flashing lights puts him on edge in a way he can't really explain to people who weren't there. I know exactly what he means. I noticed that man within 15 minutes of arriving. I pointed him out to my husband. I watched him move around that building for over an hour, getting closer and closer to my children, and I still almost didn't leave in time. That's the thing nobody tells you about situations like this. Your instincts are usually right. The problem is that every reasonable part of your brain is working against them, telling you you're overreacting, that it's a public place and that nothing bad happens in a Chuck E. Cheese on a Saturday night. Trust the feeling and leave. Found the listing on a Thursday night, sitting on the floor of my friend Kendra's apartment, surrounded by everything I owned and 4 garbage bags. I've been staying with her for 11 days after my previous living situation fell apart fast and ugly, and as grateful as I was, I could feel the clock running. She had her own life, and I needed to move. The listing was on a local housing board, the kind of bare-bones site with no photos and no verification of anything. The price was the first thing that caught me. $450 a month, including utilities, in a city where I'd been looking at $800 for a shared bedroom. I almost scrolled past it, assuming it was a scam. The ad was sparse. Private room in a quiet residential home. Females only. Respectful household. Serious inquiries only. A list of rules about guests and noise were longer than the rest of the ad combined. No photos. I emailed anyway because $450 is $450. He responded within minutes. Said his name was Gerald. He explained the females only rule right away, unprompted, and said that he'd had problems in the past with male renters being disruptive and disrespectful of the space. He was a retired widower, he said. Quiet, kept to himself, and just wanted a responsible tenant to help with the bills. He could show the room tomorrow if I were available. I told Kendra about it, and she asked me to at least look before committing to anything. I said of course. The house was a narrow 2-story on a residential street. Well kept. Nothing alarming about it from the outside. Gerald answered the door before I knocked, which meant he'd been watching for me. He was in his mid-70s, slight with very pale eyes and thin white hair combed flat. He was dressed formally for a home showing, pressed slacks and a collared shirt buttoned to the top. He shook my hand with both of his and held it a moment too long and smiled without showing his teeth. The house was immaculate. Not clean the way people clean before showing a room. Clean the way a place is when cleaning is a compulsion. Every surface bare. Everything perfectly parallel. A faint smell of bleach under the air freshener. He showed me the common areas first, walking slightly behind me and narrating in a soft, measured voice. He showed me the kitchen, the living room where he spent most of his time, and a small bathroom. Then the spare room upstairs. It was plain and clean and had a lock on the door. He asked me about myself while we stood in the room, where I worked, what my hours were like, and whether I had family nearby. I told him I just moved to the city, keeping it vague. He nodded along slowly and asked whether people knew my address yet, whether I'd had a chance to get settled. I thought it was small talk. I said, not really, still figuring things out. I took the room because I needed it and because the lock on the door made me feel better than I should have. I moved in on a Saturday. By the second week, I had stopped being able to ignore the feeling that something was wrong. He was always awake when I came home. Every time, no matter what hour, he was in the living room chair facing the front door, with the lamp on and the television off. He would look up when I came in and say good evening and nothing else. He never seemed to sleep. I never heard his bedroom door close at night. My things moved while I was out. Small things like my toiletries rearranged on the bathroom shelf, my jacket hung differently than I'd left it, or my shoes turned to face the opposite direction. Nothing missing, nothing damaged, just slightly wrong every time I came home. He knew my schedule before I told him. He would have dinner on the stove on the nights I got off at 6. He would mention offhand that I must be tired after the long shift on days I hadn't told him would be long. When I asked how he knew, he would smile and say he just had a feeling. I told myself it was an old man being attentive. I told myself I was lucky, and I said this to myself for about 3 weeks. I found the notebook on a Tuesday morning. He left for his weekly grocery run, and I was in the kitchen making coffee. It was on the counter beside the refrigerator, not hidden at all, just sitting there like a notepad does. I picked it up thinking it was a grocery list. My name was written across the top of the first page. I stood in the kitchen and read it. Daily entries going back 5 weeks, starting 2 weeks before I'd even responded to his listing. My full name, which I had never given him in full. A physical description so detailed it turned my stomach. My workplace, my old address, Kendra's name and address. He had researched me before I existed to him as anything other than a target. The entries tracked my routine with the precision of someone who had been watching for a long time. The language shifted as the entries went on. Less observational, more personal, delusional in a way that made my legs feel unstable. He wrote about me like we had an established relationship, like I was already his. I should have left right then. I know that. But instead, I opened the cabinet above the refrigerator where he kept his miscellaneous papers and found 2 more notebooks behind a stack of folders. Different names on the covers, same format. The second one was from 4 years ago. I read the last entry. 4 words and a date. She tried to leave. I searched the name on my phone right there in his kitchen. Missing persons case. Unsolved. Last known address listed as this house. The case had gone cold. There were 2 others when I searched the third name. I went upstairs and started putting things in my bag as quietly as I could. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was operating on something more basic than thought. Just moving and just get out, get out, get out. I packed for maybe 4 minutes and then I stopped. There was a shadow under my bedroom door. He was standing directly outside in the hallway. I could see the outline of his feet in the gap beneath the door, perfectly still. He didn't knock and didn't say a word. Didn't move. Just stood there in the dark hallway outside my door in complete silence, while I stood on the other side of it unable to breathe. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like a long time. I backed up slowly to the window and unlatched it without taking my eyes off the shadow under the door. I went out the window onto the porch roof, in my socks, and dropped into the side yard and ran. Called the police from 3 blocks away. I sat on the curb of a stranger's house in the dark and shook while I talked to the dispatcher. They searched the house that night. Gerald was taken in for questioning. I gave my statement and handed over everything I'd photographed in his kitchen before I ran. The detective I spoke with was professional and measured and gave almost nothing away. But at the end of our conversation, she asked me if I'd ever gone into the basement while I was living there. I told her I didn't know there was a basement. She wrote something down and didn't respond to that. She thanked me for coming in and told me I'd be contacted with any updates. That was 8 months ago. The investigation is ongoing and I've been advised not to discuss specifics. Gerald has not been charged with anything at all, which is its own kind of horror that I still live with every day. I still don't know what they found in the basement. I've never asked directly and nobody has told me. I think about that on purpose. I let myself not know, because I have a feeling that if I did know, I would never sleep again. I only had one serious boyfriend in my life, who I had broken up with a few months prior. I also don't enjoy one-night stands, and I wasn't digging dudes that were at the clubs in Seoul. But I still wanted to have some sort of romantic experience, I suppose, so my friend recommended I use this dating app to meet English-speaking Koreans. That way I could meet someone and experience the actual dating culture. I thought, I'm young, so why not? I was just so eager to have new experiences. Maybe it sounds dumb to try dating in a foreign country, but it actually worked out for me eventually. Just not the first date. I met him on a dating app after being in Seoul for about 3 weeks. Let's call him Tim. I still don't know the culture or city very well and was a bit naive about everything. He eagerly wanted to meet for a date after talking to me and seems nice. I should have asked more questions, and I should have noticed that he was not giving me many details about himself. Tim was a guy a bit older than me, but claimed he was a college student. I assumed he had done his military time. All men in Korea have to, and returned to school. We talked for a bit and decided to meet for a tea date near the school I went to. He wanted to come to my dorm originally to pick me up, but I live in an all-women's dorm, and I didn't want him to know exactly where I lived since we were still strangers. So instead, I insisted we meet at the main town center near the subway. He really didn't like this idea, which looking back was a red flag, but eventually I insisted. The night of the date, I waited an hour for this guy. He was very late. Tim weirdly claimed he just wanted to make me wait. I thought he was kidding and messaged him a laughing emoji, assuming he was just lost. When he finally arrived, he was much smaller than I thought, but a man's height has never been something I cared about much. He was also quite thin. Maybe I let my guard down because I didn't see him as physically threatening to me, which was a mistake in the end. Right off the bat, he was way too touchy with me, and breathed creepily and heavily. I was so put off by his demeanor. I'm usually very tolerant with different personality types, but this was just very odd to me. I had been told that Korean men would be polite and not so touchy on the first date. He was also dressed oddly, like in business attire for a date, but I thought that maybe it was just a Korean thing. Again, I was dumb and knew jack shit about the culture. Then the first thing he said to me was, "You're not as white as I thought you were." I thought that was a translation error, but his English was near perfect, so I asked for clarification and he said what he meant. "I thought you would be more white. Your skin is darker than I thought and your eyes aren't green." Are you pure European? Now I was officially weirded out. First of all, I'm pretty much as white as you can get. I'm Irish and Scandinavian, so yeah. And why did he care in the first place anyway? Why does my skin color matter to this guy, and why is he bringing it up? He said about 3 times on the date how he wished I had greener eyes, and every time I would just reply, well, maybe my online photos make me look brighter, and brushed it off as him being nervous and trying to start a conversation. Isn't it funny the dumb excuses you make for people when you're panicking? When we arrived at the tea place, I tried to order a basic raspberry tea, and he stopped me and told me I had to have this special tea. I thought it was weird that he wanted to choose my tea for me, but in my head I brushed it off once again. He really insisted I drink only this tea type, and I just agreed. These small details become weirder later. After tea, he asked if we could look around my school. It was dark, but the school was very well lit. So I agreed, and the whole time we walked around, he would randomly stop and just grab me for long hugs. At first, I let it happen, but then I stopped him, and he just kept trying. He kept grabbing me and breathing hard into my neck. It was so awkward. He would also not tell me any personal details about himself. I asked so many questions, desperately trying to distract from all the awkward grabbing and to try and get to know him. He would never tell me anything. He even said at one point, "I'm a mysterious man." Almost like a weird movie line. He also said something like, "You look so much like my favorite movie character," and I asked too, but he said that I would have to figure it out on my own. Finally, he said, "I want to go to a dark area," and in my head I screamed heck no. At this point, I wanted the date over fast. He somehow knew there was a wooded area behind my campus, and he said we should go there. I said no and that I wanted to stay near the main campus in town, but he kept pushing. Finally, he grabbed my arm and started dragging me there anyway. He said, "I can't let anyone see." And I started to panic. I finally ripped my arm away and just demanded we leave and go back to the main road immediately. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't ask for help or get angry. Maybe I was scared, but I just began to book it to the main road and he followed. We ended up in front of a hospital near the center of town, and I told him it was time for him to go. I made some excuse and he was pleading with me to stay. I told him we could meet the next day. I lied, and that I would message him. I just wanted to get away at this point. I was pretending it was all okay just so he would leave. Suddenly, he's leaning in to kiss me, and I immediately think, no, this is not happening. But it was so much worse. Instead, I feel pain in my face. It takes me a second to realize he was literally biting my face, like a dog. I had never felt the sensation before. He leaned his head sideways and bit me on the nose and cheek, seemingly as hard as he could. I screamed and pushed him away from me. His face looked so freaky, and I barely had time to react in words. Instead, I ran up the sidewalk until I saw a convenience store on the right. I ran to the back of the store and bent down to start crying. The man who owned the store started to yell at me, but I couldn't explain my situation. I just begged him in English to let me stay. I ended up having to buy a popsicle to stick around. I guess Tim didn't follow me. I peered outside the store and didn't see him. I texted a friend and waited for them to get me to take me back to my dorm. On the way, I messaged Tim and basically told him to stay away from me. I told him he was a creep, that he shouldn't bite women, and something along the lines of calling the police. And then I blocked him. I was so scared to walk around my school after that. I was so afraid he would find me somehow, and I'm just so thankful I never let him pick me up at my dorm. I called my mom to tell her what happened when suddenly she said, "Wait, what did he ask you?" She then put some details together and realized that all of these weird things had to do with the 50 Shades of Grey books. At first I thought she was just being silly and overthinking a bad date. I thought she was joking. But man, she was right. She had recently seen the movie or read the book or something and knew the details. The eye color and the way he dressed, and the tea he made me drink, and the random lines he said. It all matches the books and movies, for his dirty little fantasy. My mom thinks he picked me because I look like the girl in that movie to him. It explains why he was so fixated on my appearance, and his whole thing with the biting and trying to dominate me. Even if it wasn't his intention, I later learned that there are some few creeps who seek out foreign girls to dominate and have sex with, as like a prize. They call it riding the white horse or something along those lines. On a happier note, this bad experience didn't stop me. I eventually met someone else in Korea and we ended up falling in love. We even did the whole long distance thing, and now I'm living in Korea studying and working, hoping to marry soon. So I guess I didn't let bad creepy guys stop my life. I was working at a sports bar in the morning and a big dirty fellow sat down in my section. He had shoulder-length wild hair and dirty torn clothing. You know, typical loony garb. But I'm a good waitress. I don't plan on treating him any different than any other customer, so I greet him and I'm instantly hit with the smell of garbage. I grew up neglected and abused, which is important for a few reasons, some of which come into play later. 1, I know what it's like to be judged, and I empathize and overcompensate when I deal with someone that I think has been wrongfully judged. 2, my parents were creepy hoarders. So the smell of garbage, or garbage and BO together, especially gives me anxiety attacks. 3, because of the abuse and some other trauma, I have severe PTSD. This sports bar was the last job I was able to hold, which means I'm always on high alert and hypersensitive to my surroundings and possible threats. I think in terms of defense always, especially concerning my home. So even though the smell of this man was skyrocketing my anxiety, I treated him well. I figured he was down on his luck. He came in on all-you-can-eat taco bar day and stayed for 5 hours. And I figured he hadn't eaten much lately, which struck a personal chord with me because our parents didn't feed us and we often went days without food. I felt sorry for him, so I went above and beyond when serving him. He obviously appreciated it and he left. Nothing unusual. He returned the next week and requested me. This time he brought some emails he printed out between him and his ex and asked me if I could read them and explain some of the things his ex said since I was a girl. I told him I would read it when I wasn't working, which I had no intention of doing. And I took them and shoved them in my purse. From the emails I could see his name was Steve. He later asked what days and shifts I work, and I lied through my teeth. He started asking other personal questions too. And I'm used to this. I've waited tables for 8 years at this point and dealt with a fair bit of creepers, so I have a whole fabricated life story on deck designed to deter any funny business. Stuff like my boyfriend is a giant with anger issues, or I have nosy neighbors, etc. I remember that the only true thing I ever told him was that my sister worked at Subway, and I accidentally mentioned her name. I remember vividly because I had a very strong gut feeling that I shouldn't say it. I wish I had listened to that. A week later, during one of my night shifts, Steve came in and he was pissed. He demanded to know why I wasn't working when I said I was. I said I had traded a lot of shifts recently. Steve got super close to me and exclaimed that I better be here next time, and he left. A cook told me he had seen that guy sleeping in his car in the parking lot that morning, and he had seen the same car parked in the lot several times when he left at night. He knows it was the same car because it was filled with trash. Steve came back in after last call and told me he wanted to place an order, but I said it was too late, so he went to the bathroom. I watched for him to leave and he never did. At this point, I have a panic attack building up. I tell the bartender/manager what's going on, and he and the bouncer find him standing on the toilet in the stall. They drag him out and tell him he can never come back. I told my boyfriend, so when he picked me up, he brought 2 friends, and I discreetly hid my face and disguised myself when I left, checking the mirrors to see if we were being followed. Steve never came back, and I ended up quitting shortly after anyway. Eventually, my boyfriend and I broke up, and I kept our apartment and my sister had moved in. A few months later, things took a turn for the worst. I started dating my girlfriend, who was from a small town, and she wanted to take a weekend trip back home. When we got back, one of the window panes was busted in a multiple-paned window, and I asked my sister about it, and she hadn't noticed. She hadn't left the house all weekend, and she didn't hear glass breaking or anything suspicious. This did not feel like a break-in attempt, and the more we thought about it, the scarier it became. 1, we are dead broke. There's nothing you could get any money from inside. Trust me, I've tried. And it's evident no matter what window you look in from. Like I said, I think defense, so all the windows have blinds, but there are a few gaps in them from the cats. I've looked through these gaps multiple times to be completely aware of what can and cannot be seen. Also, I put long screws in all the window frames so they can't be opened more than 4 to 6 inches. 2, the window pane was pried out, not busted in, meaning they knew somebody was home and they didn't want to be heard. 3, it was the only night in over a year that I left town. I didn't put it on Facebook, and I only told a few good friends. Neither my sister nor I have cars, so you can't look in the driveway and see who's home. The next night, we heard the neighbor's dogs barking and growling, and we heard footsteps in the yard. I grabbed the gun, went to the living room next to the yard, and listened, thinking to myself, be smart. Is this 2 feet or 4? And the second I realized it was bipedal, I started flipping the lights on and off rhythmically to make the person think we were signaling our neighbor. That made them leave. Sign number 4. It wasn't a break-in attempt. You don't return to the house you failed to break into the day before. My sister and I got tasers and wasp spray. It's cheaper than pepper spray and sprays farther, because I don't have a CNC and my sister won't touch a gun. The rest of the week was quiet and my sister was now armed, so that weekend my girlfriend and I decided to go out. We got in a stupid fight that night, and when she dropped me off, I threw $20 in her car and said something snarky like, "Here's my half of the tab," and went inside. She noticed when she was a few blocks away and texted that she was going to come give it back, but I told her not to. She knocked, but I didn't answer because I was mad. I heard footsteps come up to my bedroom window, and I waited for her to knock on the window so I could yell that I told her not to come by, but she just walked off. She texted to say she tucked the 20 in the screen door, so I got up to grab it and there was nothing there. I told her it wasn't there and asked if it could have fallen out, and it wasn't possible. Then I asked why she walked to my window, and she said she hadn't. This meant whoever saw her leave the money had to be 50 feet or less from the door. It had only been 3 minutes tops from when she dropped it off to when I checked, and the only place it could have been was in our backyard. It also means whoever walked up to my window knew my girlfriend was there to see me and knew which room was mine. A week later, we heard footsteps in the yard again. I did the same routine, grabbed the gun, stood in the living room, and then started with the lights. Then I had an idea. This person needs to think they can be seen, so I started to flip the switch every time I heard a step. Once they noticed, they started running, so I ran to look out the peephole to see a big fellow with wild hair running down the alley. Even though I didn't get a great look, the general outline looked like Steve. So I started looking for the emails he gave me. Like I said, I'm always on high alert, and he raised concern. The second I noticed his full name was on the emails, I decided I was going to keep them. I got his last name and searched his public record, then I pulled up his most recent mugshot and asked my sister if she had seen the man before, and her face went ghost white. She said yes, he smelled like garbage, and that made her anxious too. He came into her job, Subway, a few times, but every time he came in, he asked her lots of questions. She said she will never forget the creepy, menacing smile he plastered on his face, the second she told him her name and the feeling of pure fear it gave her. She rides her bike to and from work, so I'm betting he followed her home. One thing became painfully clear. He didn't hurt my girlfriend when she left the money, and he didn't touch my sister when she rode her bike out. This was about me. The second she told me this, I called the cops. I gave them the emails and told them everything I knew, down to the name of the cook I knew that could describe his car. They found his car within a week, and it was abandoned by the lake, full of trash and a few personal belongings, and pages of his crazy thoughts or intentions. There were hundreds of pages about me and what he thought about me, my sister, and a checklist of all the subways he checked to find her, what he learned from her, the layout of our house, my girlfriend's info, and, the most screwed up, his very sexually charged plan to keep me alive while he cut me up and ate me. The plan was to break in, kill my sister, and wait for me to come home. Then he was going to cut off a piece of me a day and make me watch while he ate it, and masturbated. I had PTSD before this happened, and so did my sister, and this event made it so much worse for us. My sister can't work either now, and we are both in the disability process. I debated posting this for a long time. I don't like thinking or talking about it, and it gives me panic attacks sometimes. It has literally taken me 6 hours to write it all out, but I decided it's a story worth telling. I'll never get over it if I keep avoiding it, and maybe, hopefully, it will help save someone else's life, so be kind, please. I've worked hotel maintenance for 11 years, across 4 different properties. You see things in that job that would genuinely surprise most people. What guests do to rooms, what gets left behind, and what people think they can get away with inside a building they're only borrowing for 2 nights. I stopped being shocked by most of it a long time ago. I'm telling you that so you understand that what happened at the Aldrin last spring wasn't something I spooked easily into doing. I know what I saw and I know what it means, and I'm still not fully over it. It was a Tuesday night, close to 11 o'clock. I was doing a routine check on the 4th floor, HVAC unit, when the call came through my radio. Room 1312 reporting an issue with the bathroom. Calm voice, no urgency. Just a guest complaint routed through the system the way they always are. I radioed back to the front desk to confirm the ticket. There was a pause on the other end. Longer than it should have been. and then Maya, our overnight desk clerk, asked me to repeat the room number. I said 1312. She told me to come to the desk. Found her standing back slightly from the computer with her arms crossed, looking at the screen like I had said something rude to her. She told me the Aldrin had 12 floors. I said I knew that. She pulled up the elevator panel diagram on her screen and pointed. Floors 1 through 12. Lobby, basement. No 13. She said the hotel had a 13th floor once, a long time ago before she worked there, before anyone currently on staff worked there. She said she didn't know exactly what happened though. Something in 1997. The floor got sealed and as far as she knew, nobody had been up there since. She said the call I received had to be a system glitch. I told her I was going to check the stairwell access anyway. She told me she'd rather I didn't go alone, and I told her I'd be 10 minutes. The 13th floor stairwell access was behind a utility door on 12 that I'd walked past probably 1,000 times without thinking about. The bolt on it was old, the kind that should have been completely seized with age and rust. It wasn't seized. It moved stiffly, but it moved, and when I put my shoulder into the door, it opened. The smell hit me first. Stale and close, like a room that hadn't seen fresh air in decades, but underneath, that's something else. Something lived in. The hallway was dark, and I used my flashlight. The carpet was the old kind, a pattern they stopped making in the 80s, thick with dust. Wallpaper peeling off in long strips. All the room doors closed. It looked exactly like it was supposed to be. An abandoned floor, untouched since Reagan was president. Except for the path. Down the center of the hallway, through the dust on the carpet, the path had been worn. Not a single trip, repeated walking, back and forth over a long period of time. It led straight down the hall to the last door on the right, room 1312. The door was slightly open with a thin line of pale light coming from inside. I stood in the hallway for a moment and listened. Nothing. I pushed the door open. Somebody had been living there. A bedroll on the floor beside the bed. Stacked cans of food on the desk. A duffel bag half open with clothes inside. A battery-powered lantern still warm to the touch. A layer of grime on everything except the areas that had been recently used. The desk, a cleared section on the floor, and the bathroom doorway. I went to the bathroom. The mirror above the sink had some names written on it. Floor to ceiling, edge to edge, written in something dark and rust-colored that I knew immediately wasn't marker. Some of the names near the top were old and faded to almost nothing. Others lower down there were darker, more recent. There were more names on that mirror than I could count standing there. I was still reading them when I heard the stairwell door at the end of the hall open. I turned off my flashlight. I stood completely still in the bathroom doorway, listening to slow, unhurried footsteps move down the hallway toward the room. They stopped just outside the door. I could hear breathing on the other side of the wall, steady and calm, like somebody who had no idea I was there or didn't care. Then the footsteps moved away, back down the hall. The stairwell door opened and closed. I gave it 2 full minutes before I moved. On my way out, I swept my flashlight under the bed and stopped. There was a wooden box, the kind you'd keep documents in. I pulled it out and opened it. Keycards, dozens of them, stacked and loose, all deactivated, all with room numbers written on them in black marker. Different numbers, different floors, spanning what looked like many years based on different card designs and formats from different eras of the hotel's history. Underneath the key cards were photographs, printed, standard size, bundled in loose stacks. I flipped through them with my flashlight. Guests, taken without their knowledge through windows and cracked doors and in hallways, hundreds of them going back what looked like years. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the bottom of the box, where a single stack was rubber banded separately from the rest. All the same woman, taken over what looked like multiple visits, different seasons based on her clothing. The early photos were taken from a distance. They progressed. The last one in the stack was taken inside a hotel room. Low light, with a woman asleep in bed, taken from close enough that I could see the detail of her face clearly. I recognized her. Not personally, but from a news story I'd seen a couple years back. A woman who had stayed in the Aldrin for a work conference in 2019 and never checked out. They found her 3 miles away. The case was still unsolved as far as I knew. I called 911 from the stairwell and waited on the 12th until they arrived. They swept the floor and found the room empty. Whoever had been in that hallway was gone, and whatever access point they used to come and go was something. Investigators are apparently still trying to locate inside the building structure. The box was taken as evidence. The mirror was photographed and documented. The detective assigned to the case called me the following morning with a question. She asked if I had written anything on the mirror myself or touched it in any way. I said no and asked why. She paused and then told me there was a name at the very bottom of the mirror, written smaller than the others. below everything else like it had been added last. It was my name, and underneath it my work schedule for the current week, written out day by day. I haven't been back to the Aldrin since. I don't know how long that floor was being used or how many of those names mean what I think they mean. The investigation is ongoing, and I've been told not to discuss specifics, which is part of why I've kept this vague. I moved into the basement apartment on a Friday in February. I'd taken it sight unseen, beyond a few photos online because I needed something fast and the price was low enough that I could actually breathe for a few months while I got settled into the new city. The building was a converted older home with 3 units, mine in the basement and 2 above it. The landlord lived directly upstairs in the middle unit. His name was Jerry. He met me at the door on move-in day with a handshake and a spare key and a list of building rules typed out on a single sheet of paper and laminated, which should have told me something about the kind of man he was, but I was tired from the drive and not paying close enough attention. He was in his mid-60s, average height, slim with close-cropped gray hair, and small pale eyes that were always slightly more focused than the situation called for. Friendly in a way I couldn't find any fault with specifically, but that never quite felt warm. He helped me carry 2 boxes and without being asked, and then stood in my living room for a few minutes longer than necessary, making conversation before I got him out. The apartment itself was fine. Low ceilings, small windows up near ground level, and a little dark even during the day, but clean and functional. I set up my stuff over the weekend and started work Monday and told myself I'd made a reasonable decision. The first thing I noticed was the schedule thing. About 2 weeks in, I was heading out for work and Jerry was coming down the stairs from his unit at the same moment, which I thought was a coincidence. Then it happened 3 days in a row and I started paying attention. He seemed to always be in the shared entryway or the parking lot or the laundry room at the exact times I was coming or going. Not every time, but enough that I started clocking it. He'd make small talk and how work was going and mention something about the building. Nothing inappropriate, just always there. Then he started knowing things. Small things at first. He asked one morning how the Thai place was, and I hadn't told him I'd ordered Thai the night before. He mentioned once that I sounded like I had a rough call, and I had. I had a difficult work call that had upset me, and I'd taken it in my bedroom with the door closed and my voice pretty low. He asked me how my back was doing after I'd spent a Saturday moving furniture around. A Saturday he wasn't home for. A Saturday I hadn't spoken to him on at all. I told myself old building and thin floors and walls, so I told myself he was just perceptive. I also told myself I was being paranoid and that a nosy landlord was annoying, but not a reason to break at least 2 months in. I was very good at explaining these things away back then. I found the hole on a Wednesday night in April. I'd been lying in bed reading, and the lamp on my nightstand was throwing light up at the ceiling at an angle it didn't usually hit, and something in the corner caught my eye. I got up and stood under it and looked. A small dark circle, maybe the diameter of a pencil, in the corner where the ceiling met the wall. I got my phone's flashlight and stood on the bed and looked directly into it. There was a lens inside it. I stood there on my bed for a long moment just breathing. Then I got down and got a piece of black electrical tape from my desk drawer and covered it completely and pressed it flat and went to bed. I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark listening to the sounds of the building and thinking about every conversation Jerry and I ever had and recontextualizing all of it and feeling sick. I woke up at 7 and the first thing I did was look at the ceiling. The tape was gone. I got up and walked to the corner and looked up. The hole was there, same size, same position, but the ceiling around it was slightly different. Fresh paint, matched perfectly to the existing color, feathered out around the hole so it blended. Done carefully, done by somebody who knew what they were doing. Done while I was asleep in the bed 6 feet away. I stood in my bedroom in the early morning and understood very clearly that whatever this was, it was not something I could rationalize anymore. I didn't confront him. I want to be clear about that choice because looking back, I think it's the reason I'm here to write this. Instead, I went to a hardware store before work and bought a small Wi-Fi camera, the kind people use for pet monitoring, and set it up on my bookshelf, pointed directly at the hole in the ceiling before I left for work. I angled it so it looked like it was just sitting there among my books. I reviewed the footage on my lunch break. At 11:08 in the morning, I think, 2 hours after I left, my bedroom door opened. Jerry walked in with a key. He was carrying a small paint kit and a roll of tape. He walked directly to the corner without looking around, like he'd been there 100 times, peeled something off the ceiling that I couldn't make out from the camera angle, touched up the area around the hole for about 4 minutes, packed up his kit, and turned to leave. Then he stopped. He turned back toward the room and stood at the foot of my bed and looked at it. He just stood there with his hands at his sides, looking at my unmade bed in the empty apartment. I watched the timestamp count upward. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. For 4 minutes and 18 seconds, he stood at the foot of my bed looking at it before he finally walked out and pulled the door shut behind him. I sat in my car in the work parking lot for a long time after watching that. I knew I needed to go to the police. I also knew what I had so far. A landlord who entered my apartment, which was a violation but not necessarily criminal on its own, without more context, and a hole in my ceiling that I couldn't yet prove he put there. I needed more, so that night when I watched from my window and saw Jerry's car pull up out of the lot at 8 p.m., I took the emergency spare key he'd given me on move-in day and I went upstairs. His apartment was a mirror image of mine in layout but felt nothing like it. The living room was sparse and impersonal. No photos, no warmth at all, just furniture arranged with the kind of clinical precision. The kitchen was the same, and I moved quickly, checking rooms, telling myself I'd look for 10 minutes or so and leave. The back bedroom door was padlocked from the outside. A padlock on the outside of an interior bedroom door in a man's own apartment. I stood in the hallway looking at it and felt a particular cold that comes not from temperature, but from understanding something you can't take back. I went back to my apartment and got my bolt cutters from the storage closet where I kept my bike gear. I went back upstairs and cut the lock, opened the door and found the light switch and stood in the doorway for a long moment before I could make myself go in. The room had no furniture. What it had instead, covering every wall floor to ceiling, was a system. Multiple monitors on a folding table against the far wall are showing live feeds. The building entryway, the laundry room, the parking lot, and the hallway outside my door. Feeds from cameras I had never seen and couldn't account for. The walls themselves were covered in printed photographs and documents, organized by section, each section separated by strips of blue painter's tape. 6 sections in total. 6 different people and 6 different sets of photos and notes and printed records. Some of the photos were taken through windows. Some were taken inside apartments, from angles that could have only come from hidden cameras. Each section had a name written at the top in neat black letters, and below the name, a printed schedule, financial records pulled from the mail or documents, relationship information, and family contacts. Years of accumulated detail on each person, built slowly and methodically the way you'd build a case file. 4 of the 6 sections had a thick red diagonal line drawn through them from corner to corner. Those people were gone. I found out a year later that 2 of them had simply moved away and could be accounted for. The other 2 are still listed as open missing persons cases in 2 different counties. I didn't know that while standing in that room. I just knew the red lines felt like something being closed. My section was on the wall directly facing the door. The largest section, the most recent, the most densely covered. Months of photographs, schedules, and notes written in small, precise handwriting about my habits and patterns and routines. Photos taken through my bedroom window, my living room window, and inside my apartment from camera angles I still can't fully account for. In the center of my section, pinned at eye level, was a photograph of me asleep in my bed, taken the previous night, while my camera was pointed at the ceiling, while I was lying 6 feet away in the dark. At the bottom of my section, written directly on the wall in black marker, was a date, 3 days from that night. I called 911 from the street, sat in the curb across from the building with my phone and my bolt cutters and waited. They arrested Jerry 2 hours later coming back to the building. His name wasn't even Jerry. I'm not going to put his real name here, but it just wasn't Jerry. Know that. And the identity he'd used to purchase the building was constructed. He'd done this before. 2 other properties, 2 other cities, and the same setup in a back room each time. The detective who called me a week later was careful with what she shared but told me enough. She told me they found 19 cameras in my apartment. Not 1, 19, placed in every room over a period of months. Systematically, 1 by 1, I'd found one. I had been living for weeks thinking I'd found the thing, and there were 18 others I never knew about. I asked about the date on the wall. She was quiet for a moment and then said they were looking into it. She never called me back about that specifically. I've stopped expecting her to. And no, I don't live there anymore. I don't live in a basement anymore. Don't think I ever will again. I sleep with 2 cameras of my own in my bedroom now, and I check the footage every morning before I do anything else. I think about those 4 minutes at the foot of my bed more than anything. More than the cameras, more than the room upstairs, more than the date on the wall. Just a man standing alone in a stranger's empty apartment, staring at an unmade bed for 4 minutes in complete silence. I don't know what he was thinking about. I think that's the part I'm most grateful not to know. The This happened when I was 18 and had just moved to a new bigger city about a 30-minute drive from the small town I grew up in. I moved into my first apartment in what I thought was a decent neighborhood and lived there without incident for 6 months, with my boyfriend at the time. Things began sour between us, and since my boyfriend had recently lost his job, it was decided I would be the one to take over the lease and he would move out. It was sticky and unpleasant, but after some time of him dragging his feet, I was finally free of him. I had a friend from work move in to help me with rent since it was a 2-bedroom and all was well for a while. One weekend during January, I had been going out late, and I went to see a musical in a nearby town, so I got home shortly after midnight, kicked off my shoes, and settled down with a bowl in front of the living room TV to unwind. My roommate was out of town all weekend, visiting my family, so I had the place to myself and didn't bother being quiet about it. I was still wearing my dress and tights, completely relaxing, when I heard a knock at my door a couple feet to my left. I glanced at the clock, which almost read 1 a.m., and I thought, who the heck is knocking at my door this late? My front door had half a window covered by blinds, but it was very obvious I was home, as the TV was only a foot or so past the door. My spider senses began to tingle, but I was young, naive, and from a small town where things are pretty safe. I never thought that what was about to happen would ever happen to me. I peeked out between the blinds without opening the door and flicked on my porch light, which illuminated a young man. He couldn't have been more than 25, slight build, honestly looking pretty harmless. Background, I'm like 5'2" and around 110 pounds, female. I'm pretty scrappy, so I looked at this dude and sized him up. I actually thought to myself, I could probably take him if I needed to. Before hollering through the door, yes, he launched into a story talking fast about how he just got into a car accident in front of my house. His young daughter was hurt and his phone had been slung in the wreck. It was lost, and could he please use my phone to call an ambulance? My heart was immediately in my throat. A hurt child? This man needed my help, but something felt wrong. I told him I'd call 911 for him, and he said, that would be fine, but could he please use my phone to call the child's mother to explain they were going to the ER? This seemed reasonable to me in my young naive brain, but I was still wary. Against my better judgment, trust me, after this, someone could be on fire on my front doorstep and I wouldn't open the door for them after this lesson learned. I cracked the door open and quickly slipped the phone out to him, locking the padlock the moment my hand was clear. I still felt something was wrong, so as he made a call, which I could not hear, I paced my living room floor and grabbed a kitchen knife, holding it down to my side, waiting. Everything in my body was screaming at me that something was wrong, but I couldn't turn away from a hurt child. I just couldn't. I wanted to help. A few moments passed and I seemed to calm a bit, briefly sitting down to wait. I put the kitchen knife down next to me on the sofa. When I heard a knock signaling me that the dude was gone, I got up without thinking and walked to the door, leaving the knife behind. I cracked the door only an inch, just as before, and he went to slip the phone back to me. It was at this moment everything changed. Suddenly, a much larger man stepped from the shadow to the left of my door. I briefly registered he was wearing a ski mask, and my heart jumped to my throat in an instant. He kicked the heavy metal door before I even had a second to react, which, being still ajar, flew into me, knocking me backwards into the ground. Another man came from the other side of the door, all of them rushing forward in my apartment. I'm not sure if there were 3 or 4 total, but suddenly 3 large masked men were looming over me as I lay stunned on my apartment floor. They stood between me and the exit and began to circle me, closing rings. My mind registered that they were screaming at me, various things along the lines of, "Give me all your money." The largest of them reached into his brown Carhartt coat and withdrew a gun, which he pointed at me as I lay at their feet, still stunned by the force of the door hitting me and knocking me to the ground. Fight or flight kicked in and my brain screamed at me. Fight for your life. Now, before I get an earful, let me say you really don't know how you'll react in a situation until you've been the one staring down the barrel of a gun. Instinct made me do this, and I know it wasn't the smartest thing per se, but this is just what happened. Can't change it now. I recall the men bouncing up and down while they screamed at me. In retrospect, it seems almost comical how they jumped around me. In the heat of the moment, I looked up and decided they'd shoot me if they wanted to, but I was not going down without a fight, and I was not about to let them drag me down the hallway to a bedroom and do know who's what with me either. I looked up at the gun inches from my face and I got angry. I reached up my hand and smacked it away. Luckily I didn't die, then immediately reached out and grabbed the coat of the nearest guy, using it to haul myself to my feet. I was almost up and I even managed to throw a punch, which moved the ski mask of the one I swung at. barely landing, but affording me a glimpse of his face when one reached out and knocked me back down. Hard, but I wouldn't be stopped. I barely felt the blow, which left me bruised later. Hands flying, I struck out in every way imaginable. I kicked out at them from the self-defense position I'd been taught in the safety class. I was a whirlwind of hair, nails, and fists. Looking up at them, I briefly registered that from the looks on their faces, this robbery and this girl were not going or reacting as anticipated. They were flustered by my apparent lack of fear. They hadn't expected me to not give one flying shit about the gun to my face. I literally smacked it away when they pointed at me. Again, I'm extremely lucky it didn't go off. I know this. My mind became focused enough to register. I need help. I was alone in my apartment, but hopefully they didn't know that. I began to scream at the very top of my lungs. Michael! Over and over I yelled his name at the top of my lungs. Michael was my neighbor, ex-military, a mountain of a man who I knew owned guns and shared a living room wall with my flat. They must have thought I wasn't alone because they panicked and fled out the front door, taking my cell phone and purse as they went, fleeing into the dark night. I ran after them, barefoot in the snow, screaming, "Help! Help!" to no one but the night sky, adrenaline pumping through my veins like fire. Michael emerged at my side carrying a shotgun, dressed only in boots and boxers. I pointed to the tracks in the snow and bless him. He pursued them, coming back a moment later empty-handed. My phone was gone and I tried to call my parents from his, but nobody answered. Michael let me spend the rest of the night on his couch, since I was becoming quickly hysterical now that my adrenaline was ebbing. I called the police. They came and I made a report. News vultures quickly appeared outside my building and I ended up being the top story on the news the next morning. Although I declined to be on TV, I just wanted to be done. Looking back, I was very lucky. I could have been shot, killed, raped, or whatever they wanted to do with me. Luckily, my insane response startled the shit out of them and they ran. I'm more street smart now. Carry a taser and pepper spray everywhere I go, and never allow my sympathy for another person to endanger my own life. It sucks I have to think that way, but I'd rather live as a jerk than die a good Samaritan. I moved out shortly after, breaking my lease and citing concerns for personal safety. Had the police report to prove it, and thankfully my landlord understood and let me go. I found a new place and take great care to listen to my instincts when they speak up. I'd been dancing for around a year now, and before anyone says anything, yes, I know. Yes, I'm careful, and yes, I've heard every opinion about it, and I don't need yours. I pay my own rent, bought my own car, and I have my own life, and I built it myself at 21 years old, which is more than most people my age can say. I'm not writing this for judgment. I'm writing this because what happened to me needs to be somewhere other than just inside my head. I work at a club called Silhouettes. It's not a dive, not high-end, somewhere in the middle. Kind of place where decent lighting and a 2-drink minimum and a door guy named Terry who is approximately the size of a refrigerator. I've worked there since I was 20. I got hired 2 weeks after my birthday. I know the staff. I know the regulars. I know which bartender will cover for you and which manager actually has your back, and which ones you smile at and then ignore. After a year, you know everything about a place like that. You develop a read on people fast because your safety kind of depends on it. I did not read him fast enough, and that is the thing I keep coming back to. He started coming in sometime in late spring. I didn't notice him the first few times because there was nothing to notice. Average height, average build. Always came in alone and always took the same corner table near the back left of the main floor. Dark hair going gray at the sides, always in clean clothes, nothing flashy. He ordered one drink at the start of the night and made it last for hours, which the bartenders hated but wasn't against any rules. He tipped fine, didn't cause any problems, and didn't get loud or grabby or any of the things that get a guy bounced. He requested for me private dances pretty consistently from the second or third time he came in. Again, nothing unusual about that. Regulars pick favorites, but that's just how it works. What was unusual was that the dances were light. Most guys during a private are either nervous or they're too comfortable. You know what I mean. They either don't know where to look or they don't care where they look. He was neither. He just sat with his hands in his lap and watched my face. Not my body, my face. The whole time. Every time. He looked at my face with this calm, flat expression like he was studying something. Barely spoke at all, and when he did, it was quiet and slow and always weird, like the words were chosen carefully to sound normal but landed wrong somehow. After the first few times, the other girls started teasing me about having such a well-behaved regular. Jasmine called him my boyfriend once as a joke, and I laughed because I didn't have a better response and because I couldn't explain why it didn't feel funny. The thing that shifted it from uncomfortable to something else happened on a Thursday in July. I was doing a circuit of the floor and stopped to chat with him for a few minutes the way you do with regulars. Just maintenance conversation, keeping them happy. He asked how I was and I said, "Tired, long week." He nodded and said I'd seemed tired lately, that I seemed like I had a lot on my mind the past couple of weeks. I said something like, "Yeah, work stuff," and started to move on. He said he'd noticed I seemed more relaxed on the nights I came in later. I stopped. I asked him what he meant by that, and he just kind of tilted his head slightly and said that I seemed less tense when I had more time before my shift. Said it like it was an observation about the weather, completely casual. Here's the thing, my schedule here changes week to week. I pick my shifts off a shared calendar, and they're different almost every week. There's no way a customer should know my exact schedule well enough to draw conclusions about my mood based on what time I came in. I never told him my schedule. I barely told him anything. I smiled and said nothing and just walked away and went straight to the bathroom and stood there at the sink for a minute. Thought about it for the rest of the night, and by the time I got home, I'd mostly talked myself out of it. Maybe he just meant in general. Maybe it was a coincidence. Or maybe I was reading into a single weird sentence from a socially awkward guy who just needed somewhere to sit on Thursday nights. I was very good on talking myself out of things back then. I live in a second-floor apartment about 10 minutes from the club. It's not a bad building. Quiet neighborhood, a decent-sized balcony off the living room that looks out of a narrow alley and a row of dumpsters, which is not exactly a view, but I liked being able to get fresh air without going all the way downstairs, especially when I got home late and didn't want to be outside alone. It was a Saturday, almost 2:30 in the morning. I'd gotten home about 20 minutes before, and I was still winding down from the shift. That specific kind of wired tired where your body is exhausted but your brain won't stop. I made tea and went out on the balcony in my sweats and just stood there in the dark for a few minutes, letting the night air hit me. I wasn't looking at anything in particular, just standing there with my mug, zoning out, trying to decompress. My eyes were just kind of unfocused on the alley below, and then they focused in. It took me a second because he was staying in the darkest part of the alley, back by the chain link fence near the dumpster, partially in the shadow of the building next door. Completely still, not walking through and not on his phone. Not really doing anything that a person does when they happen to just be somewhere. Just standing there in the dark at 2:30 in the morning looking up at my balcony. Then I recognized him immediately. The height and build, the way he stood with his hands at his sides. It had to be him. I don't know how long I stood there before my body caught up to my brain. It felt like a long time, but was probably only a few seconds. I stepped back through the sliding door and closed it and locked it and stood in my living room shaking. Called the police. Stood by the door while I was on the phone with them and watched the alley through the glass. He didn't move the entire time I was on the phone. Just stood there in the dark below my balcony. Till, at some point before the officers arrived, he was gone. They checked the alley and found no one. They took my information and my description and told me to call if anything else happened, and that was essentially that. I went into Silhouettes the following Friday because I needed the money and because I told myself if he showed up, I'd have Terry deal with it immediately. He showed up. Same corner table, same drink, same expression. I saw him from across the floor the second he sat down and felt my stomach drop. I was trying to figure out the best way to get to my manager without making a scene when he looked up and saw me see him, and he just smiled. Small and calm like we were sharing a private joke. I started toward the back and had to walk past his table to get there, and as I passed, he said something quietly without looking up from his drink. He said he liked my balcony. I kept walking. I went straight to my manager, Danny, and told him everything right there. Danny is not a perfect manager, but he took it seriously. Got Terry and the guy was escorted out and told he was banned. He didn't argue. He didn't make a scene. He just stood up and put on his jacket and walked out with Terry like it was nothing. Like it was just the end of a normal night. The last part that scared me the most was how unbothered he was. 9 days later, the maintenance guy at my building found a small weatherproof camera zip-tied to the drain pipe that runs along the outside edge of my balcony. It was angled upward towards the sliding glass door. When the building manager showed me where it had been mounted, there was rust marks already forming around the zip tie around the pipe. The kind of rust that takes months to develop, so it had been there for a long time. The memory card was gone, removed cleanly and recently. The building manager said based on how the slot looked. Whoever put it there had also come back to take what was on it. I was out of that apartment inside of 3 weeks. I have a new place now in a different part of the city, 3rd floor with no balcony. The police identified him from club security footage. I was told he has a name and they are looking for him, and that is the last update. that I have received, which was 6 weeks ago. 2 weeks after I moved, I got a notification on my phone that someone had tried to log into my private Instagram account, not my regular one, my private, the one I made with a fake name and a separate email specifically so nobody from the club could connect it to me. I've never posted my face on it, never told anyone from Silhouettes it exists. They had the right email address, just got the password wrong. I don't know how he found it, and I don't know what he would have found if he'd gotten in, and I'm trying very hard to not think about either of those things too much. I just know that he's still out there and he's still looking, and whatever he was trying to find, he hasn't stopped trying to find it. Stay safe out there. This happened 17 years ago, so please forgive me if the exact details are a little fuzzy. It was the summer of 1999. I was spending the vacation with my mother in New Mexico. I was a 12-year-old girl going on 21 and had a severe attitude. I made friends easily with a few girls that lived just around the corner from my mom's house. We spent every moment together that summer. We were a group of 4, all of us thinking we were older and smarter than everybody else. Nikki, Katie, Julie, and I were the last generation of home phone lines, playing outside on the trampoline until dark and having sleepovers. We watched VHS tapes and listened to cassette tapes on our Walkman. It was okay to let your children walk around town at night, and we rarely locked the front door. We had no cell phones or internet. My backyard had a concrete wall around it and a gate. Behind the wall was desert as far as the eye could see. Just the barren wasteland of dirt, cacti, shrubs, and mountains way off in the distance. This town had a major railroad track running straight through it, and there was a major street that had gas stations galore, restaurants, hotels, and attractions. We all received the same warnings from our parents. Stay out of the desert and stay away from the tracks, and don't walk the main strip at night. Do you think we listened? Absolutely not. Julie, Nikki, and I spent our days walking through the desert, crossing the tracks and down the strip to Katie's house. Sometimes we would just walk around till dusk. Some days we would go to my house to jump on the trampoline. This particular day we got to Katie's house and prepared to stay the weekend because our parents were out of town and we were having a party. The first night the girls were jumping from a spiral staircase to a giant beanbag. I refused to participate in this due to my extreme fear of heights. We then got down to sleepover business, so to say, and decided to watch the original Exorcist. You know, the one with Linda Blair. Scary shit, man. I didn't sleep. The second night we told our parents that Katie's mom, we obviously didn't tell our parents we were alone, was going to drive us up to the movies. We all got the money for the movies and then promptly walked down the strip to get junk food at the little store. That's what we called it. Now, I wish I could say that we were aware of our surroundings, but we really weren't. We were absolutely oblivious of the man who followed us all the way back to the house. I feel that I should mention that Katie's parents were loaded. They had a huge property with numerous buildings and broken down cars that her dad was remodeling. Their house had a large open kitchen, dining room, and living room. There were no walls, and the whole room was lined with windows. There were 2 doors, front and back. The day went just as planned. We got our junk food and made it home safely. We made pizza in the oven, and for some reason one of the girls turned on the TV to the news. As we were eating, we heard a story about staying indoors because there was a report of a sketchy man walking the strip. That's it. We laughed and joked about this dude. Fast forward a few hours, I don't remember what happened, but as girls do, somebody said something that hurt Julie's feelings, and she stormed out of the house. I went after her and opened the front door just in time to see her light up a cigarette. Yes, we were bad kids. I sat with her on a bench while she groaned about the other 2. Suddenly, the air got thick with anxiety. Julie felt it too. I quietly asked if she felt like we were being watched. She responded with a tiny nod, and then we were blinded. Somebody was in a car in the driveway with their brights on us. My heart was racing as I stood up and pulled Julie out of the spot she seemed to be stuck in. As we turned to run inside, the man made a sound. I can't describe this sound other than a high-pitched squeal that turned into a growl. I was scared beyond all reason, but I somehow managed to get myself and Julie inside the house. As soon as we got inside, the headlights went off and it was pitch black again. I locked the door and turned off the light. By this time, Julie had regained her composure to tell the other 2 what had happened, as I frantically checked the back door and turned every light off. I told them to shut up, and they listened by the back door. I heard the car door close, and I remember praying that he would go away. Then right by my cheek, the door handle started to turn slowly, then frantically. I crawled away from the door and moved to where my friends were. For the next 2 or 3 hours, we sat still as stone and listened to this man bang on every window and door trying to get inside. The man was located across the room right next to 2 windows. I finally got up the courage to run to the phone and I called my mom. I told her that we were all alone and somebody was trying to get inside. I hung up with her and waited. Really screamed to the man that we called the cops, and all of a sudden the banging stopped. We sat and waited, listening to him get in his car, and then that sound again. The squeal that turned into a growl, and then he was gone. My mom and stepdad showed up and checked the whole place out. They found tire tracks and cigarette butts in the driveway where his car was, proving he had watched us for quite a while. The truly scary part was the scratch marks all over the doors and the windows. Needless to say, Katie spent the rest of the weekends at Nikki's house and had a great story for her parents when they got home. Our parents didn't punish us for lying and being reckless. I guess 2 hours of torture at the hands of a madman was enough. We made a report to the police, but the man was never caught. It happened a few days ago, and I'm still pretty shaken about it. I only just thought to post it here, so here we go. On Friday afternoon, I got a call from my friend named Sarah asking if I wanted to meet her and another friend named Lisa at Dunkin' Donuts, as we hadn't seen each other in a while. Dunkin' Donuts is a 15-minute walk from my house, so I decided I would walk. Besides, the weather was fine. I got to Dunkin' Donuts and found where Sarah and Lisa were sitting, so I went to join them. As we were chatting, I noticed that my sister, Elena, was sitting at a table in the corner of the room with her friend Jess. For some context, my sister and her friend are both 18. My sister still lives with my parents, whereas I live alone. I excused myself from the table and went over to Elena and Jess's table. They were sitting at a table with 3 seats, so I went to sit down and said, "Hey." They both jumped a little bit, but then looked more relieved than anything to see me. Immediately, Elena whispered to me, "Don't look now, but the guy in the blue shirt, I think he's been following Jess and me." I glanced over and I saw the middle-aged man sitting at a table facing away from us. He passed our table a good 5 times in the past 20 minutes to go to the bathroom, but he walks slower as he passes us. He continued. I told them that they were most likely being paranoid and that there was nothing to worry about, but for their peace of mind I offered to leave with them so they wouldn't feel as worried. I walked back over to my table and explained the situation to Sarah and Lisa. Both of them laughed it off and assumed my sister to be paranoid. Literally about a minute later, I saw the man get up from his seat and walk towards the bathroom. My eyes followed him. And sure enough, he walked extremely slow past Elena and Jess. In fact, it was almost comical how obviously slow he became. Both Elena and Jess looked in my direction, and I nodded to show that I had seen him walk slower. About 5 minutes later, I went to the toilets. On my way, I passed Elena and Jess and told them I was ready to leave whenever they were. They both agreed that they were ready to leave now. I told them that I was just going to the bathroom and that we could leave right after I had done my business. Elena had come in her car, so she was trying to give me a lift back. I went into the toilet stall, finished up with everything, and I was walking down the corridor back to the main eating area when Elena and Jess rushed into the corridor. I asked them what was up, and they explained that another man had joined the strange creeper man, and that the men were both pointing and staring at them, so they rightfully felt unsafe. We walked back into the eating area. I put my money on our table and explained to Lisa and Sarah that I was taking off, and I would explain what was going on when I got home. We all got into Elena's car and left the creeps in the car's rearview mirror. After a 2-minute drive, we reached my house. Just then I had remembered that I had been meaning to return something I had borrowed from my mother, so I asked if Elena could drive me to my parents' house, as she was going there anyway. I jumped out of the car to get what I needed when my phone rang. It was Elena. She explained that a car had driven past and had pulled into a driveway. She said the driver of the vehicle was the creep from Dunkin' Donuts. I looked out my window and sure enough, there was a car that didn't belong to the owner of the house parked on their driveway. Got the girls into my house and locked the door. I instructed Elena to take a photo of the car and its license plate, and I told Jess to call 911 as she could get the operator more information than I could. Elena took the photos and we sort of gathered around Jess as she was speaking to the operator. She had finished telling the story and I heard the operator assure us that the police would be at my house soon. A few minutes passed and there was a loud knock at the front door followed by a loud voice shouting, "It's the police." We all did a sigh of relief as I went to open the door. Jess told the operator that the police were here and she hung up. I was in the process of unlocking the door when I thought to look through the spy hole at the top of the door. I peered through it and it wasn't a police officer, it was the same guy. Frozen fear and didn't know what to say. We didn't call the police. I managed to shout back to the man through the door. Elena and Jess were both confused as to why I said this. "We had a call, sir," the man shouted back. "You have the wrong address." I yelled back and informed the girls that it was the creep at the door, not a police officer. Both were rightfully shocked and extremely scared, as was I. I was about to tell Jess to call the police again until I heard the sirens. "Sir, you have to let me in now." The man shouted again, but this time I didn't answer. He was pounding on the door. His commands for me to let him in turned into begging and pleading. I heard the police car pull up some random commotion outside. An actual police officer knocked on the door and I let him in. Yes, I checked the spy hole first. The police officers took the man into custody while another officer took Elena and Jess into the dining room for some brief questioning. I called my parents and Jess called hers. Both were here extremely quickly once we told them what had happened. The man was found with a kitchen knife on his person and some other weapons in his car. Who knows what could have happened if I hadn't looked through the spy hole first. Both my sister and her friend are fine, just shaken up after the whole incident. This happened in Antioch, California. It was around 2 a.m. I was at a friend's house, safe in warm sheltered suburbia. We were having a lot to drink, chit-chatting and enjoying ourselves. Of course, when you're having fun, time hits the fast forward button and those few minutes turn into an hour. I had too much to drink. My friend has a bit an abrupt bedtime, so I had to dodge out early, still intoxicated. I felt too shameful thinking I'd be asking too much to stay in his house to sleep off the drunkenness. I suppose he was either too rude or too drunk to consider it himself. Whatever. Sometimes a little inconvenience makes you appreciate everything else, right? I needed about an hour or so to sober up and drive back. As fast as time passed during my stay, it decided to drastically slow down as soon as I stepped out of his house. It was a cul-de-sac area, a concrete jungle with the stem of the street light breaking into a fork. Alongside the road, my car was parked. The only street light that worked was in the middle of the cul-de-sac circle, about 80 yards away. Stumbled towards my car, produced my keys, felt the metal lineup, opened my door, and shifted to the back seat. Because this was a dark, strange, and unfamiliar neighborhood, I took the leftover newspapers and a sweater in my back seat to cover myself up. I was a little scared. I wanted to camouflage myself and not be just some guy awkwardly sitting in his car waiting for time to pass in order to drive home. I couldn't fall asleep. The uncomfortable feeling of a cheap backseat bed enshrouded in darkness didn't make the chance of slumber easier. It felt too ominous. And of course, my mind began to wander. I thought of worst-case scenarios. Like how the police would shine their lights on me through the window or a drunk driver hitting my car, and... wait. In the distance, about 100 yards away, I could hear footsteps approaching. The gravel scuffed with each step forward, growing in proximity but periodically taking stops. I wondered why until it made sense in my mind. Whoever it was probably looking through cars carefully, with the intent to steal one. I couldn't recall how many cars were on the block, but I counted 3 full stops until he was at my window breathing. I froze. There was no more than 1 foot between us now. The car encapsulated me as I lay hidden beneath backseat clutter, forming myself into an object, trying my hardest to be unnoticeable, unmoving, and simply not there. "I see you," said a 40-plus-year-old man in a perverse baby talk. Imagine when you were playing hide and seek and one of your friends tricks you into coming out. He said it in that tone of voice, as if baiting me, like he was questioning whether the clutter in the back seat was just clutter or a person. I didn't want to move or check the window. I remained cluttered. Give me an Academy Award. My body reacted by minimizing my breathing so much that I felt paralyzed. I dare not look, my eyes fixated on the back of the passenger seat. I didn't blink, I didn't move, and I didn't breathe really. My heart was pounding so hard it shook my body with each throb. He circled around the car. My ears didn't fail me. I heard the steps. I felt like I was part of the car. I could feel him touching the trunk as he carefully pressed down on it, as if to test the alarm or to test me. I was in the middle of fight or flight. I couldn't do either without elevating danger. I was frozen, hoping that he was bluffing. He circled the car again, and the door handle to my right jiggled. He was pulling it multiple times. "I see you." Same tone, but more agitated and stressed. More convinced that he was trying to make that clutter move, revealing it to be of his expectations that it was me. My muscles tensed like a cow before slaughter. Tap, 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 tap. That had to be metal against glass. Take a penny right now and tap your window. A crowbar, a knife, a rock, a gun. My eyes fixated on the seat in front of me, never averting my gaze like he was. I was covered enough to where I couldn't see beyond the seat in front of me. I know I couldn't see him, but I could feel his eyes resting on top of me. "My name is Pokerface. What's your name?" The voice changed in a lower, demented, and serious tone. My mind forced a visual. It wasn't anything human. I already accepted my death. I was ready to be shot in the head, ready to take a life-changing bullet and have multiple knife wounds. Just make this sleep bearable, not excruciating, as you drain me out of life. I wouldn't know how to react. My thoughts grew dimmer. I imagined my friend waking up the next morning after a calm night of safe and sound sleep, only to discover my mutilated, defiled, and bloodied body hanging outside my car door. It was then that I heard nothing but my own heart. What was this person doing now? Just staring at me in the middle of the night? Talking to me, or a messy pile in the back seat? Time froze. The footsteps were being swallowed in the distance. Thankfully, he left. I waited another hour until the sun showed hints of itself. I jumped in my front seat and bolted out of there, wide-eyed and sober enough. My story takes place in my home country, where people are more likely to believe in the paranormal. I was around 18 when this happened. I was at home. It was late at night, around 11 p.m. I got into a fight with my boyfriend, as teens tend to do. And naturally, it got overdramatic. There was yelling on phones and tearful confessions. When I put the phone down, I got an idea in my head. Probably the stupidest thing I've ever done. I decided to walk to his house and confront him face to face. He and I only live 15 minutes apart if you walk. However, we're separated by roads that are very dimly lit. If you drive past, you'll never see anyone on the sidewalk. People just don't walk there at night because it's dark as heck. We basically live in a part of town consisting of gated communities, and I was going to walk from mine to his. So I put on a sweater, some shorts, and sneakers. My appearance plays a big part in this because I have a very stereotypically Asian doll look. Bangs, long straight dark hair, rather pale skin, and everything. And I'm short, only 5 feet tall. Until now, I could look 12 if I really wanted to. Basically, I'm the last person in the world who would look threatening, and that's not good for me. But that night I was angry. Deep down, I knew walking there was dangerous, but I wouldn't listen to the alarm bells in my brain. I set off walking at a brisk pace. It was dark. There was no one on the streets. I was completely alone and very mad. So mad that I suddenly got a nosebleed. Already, I've been tearing up from the drama, and that had to happen. I get nosebleeds when I'm stressed, so out of nowhere, blood gushed from my nose and splattered all over my clothes. It was like a running faucet, and I staved it off a bit with my hands, so my hands got bloody too. My face was tear-streaked and blood-stained. I looked like a mess, to say the least. Nevertheless, I was too mad to stop or turn back to even care. I kept walking, even more mad that my clothes were ruined. In my head, I looked like an idiot, and then I saw them. I froze. I'd just crossed the street. The sidewalk had a wall to the left because that was another gated community. To the right was the road. I saw figures moving. Men, around 4 or 5. It was so dark I couldn't see their faces, but there was a ladder leaning against the wall. One of them was on it. They'd been talking, and I could see the glint of tools hanging from their belts. Saw and a hammer. At first, I thought they were repairmen, since it's normal around here for public repairs to be done late at night so that it doesn't get in people's way in the morning. But still, like any girl, I went from angry to terrified. A gang of men in a secluded area never bodes well for any person. I was going to turn around and flee in the other direction, but it was too late. Before I could leave unnoticed, they'd seen me, because they all turned their heads towards me at the same time. For a very brief moment, we all just stared at each other. It went by fast, so fast that I didn't even have the chance to look scared. My expression was still blank. Just when I was about to flee, one of them yelled, and I was caught in my tracks. But it wasn't an angry yell. It was a high-pitched, trembling "ah" that trailed off into nothing. The rest of the men started cursing, and they scrambled. I was shaking. I thought they were going to run from me. But they were actually scared shitless. I realized this when they all ran for their car, parked right beside the sidewalk, leaving their ladder behind. They were still cursing, telling each other to hurry up as the car did the fastest, most impressive U-turn I've ever seen in my life. And they drove off in the other direction. I realized that, looking like a bloody China doll, they must have thought I was a ghost. I almost started laughing then and there, but I was too freaked out by the experience. I hightailed it to my boyfriend's house. Only around a week later did I find out in the papers that there had been a string of robberies around the area. The robbers would bring a ladder, lean it against the wall, and use it to get to houses that were located on the very border of the subdivision. Police actually found out their plans because they found a ladder that had been left behind, aka what happened during my night. One recent robbery had led to a maid being killed by the thieves. Until now, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gotten that nosebleed.